These episodes were recorded late 2020. It consists of the hosts crushing a big case of 016 and talking about a local case that we've all become very interested in over the years, the death of Neil Stonechild at the hands of our own police force. It was released in 4 parts previously over a couple months, but I've stitched all 4 parts together, and we're releasing this on the night that he died, November 25th, 1990. We're all Saskatoon locals. I don't think it's a question in our minds that our police force killed this man. So here's a story about a fairly small city's police force in the 1990s. Maybe hearing the tale of this in the past might help us make better choices in the future.
Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
It is our basic human right to be fuck up.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Occultae Veritatis.
Hello, occultists. I am Richard Bigley, and we are in for a long-haul episode on this one. Anyway, in studio with me today, I have...
Sage Murray.
Leon Felger.
And...
Ood Gallifrey.
All right, so yeah.
What about the radio demon?
Oh yeah, and the radio demon.
You don't have to introduce me. Everyone knows me. I'm the most famous member of OVpod.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, very much.
Mm-hmm. As well you should be.
So this is pretty heavy, and when I wrote it, I didn't really write any room for a poison in it, so let's just get to it right now.
So, what's your poison?
So, what's your poison?
All right, so today we are falling back to our traditional comfort beer, the original 16 Canadian Pale Ale by Great West Brewing.
It's delicious.
It is delicious.
And it sounds really crisp when you open the can.
And in 1784, the 16 Druid Kings of Saskatchewan defeated the Ice Giants and founded this beer company.
They did.
Yeah.
The 16 Druid Kings.
Did I get that correct, Leon?
Yes.
Super duper.
Fuck yeah.
Named after the original 16 Druid Kings.
Yep, of Saskatchewan.
Of Saskatchewan.
I rate this beer 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. It's a comfort beer.
It's a comfort beer.
Yeah, it's nice. It's cold. It's beer. It's not too
I'm always
hoppy.
happy to have one.
Yeah, I've never said no to an original 16.
No.
It's very inoffensive, very crisp, and it's, even in our household, which 2 of the 3 hosts, I don't know, do they know you live here?
Yeah, I live here.
Yeah. Whenever we get money for empties or extra cash or pocket change that goes into the beer tip jar, 016 is most likely going to be bought with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's get into it.
The city of Saskatoon is Saskatchewan's river city, developed around the shores of the South Saskatchewan River. Currently the largest city in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon has become a cultural hub with many theaters, restaurants, art galleries, music venues, and historic buildings calling it home. Booming with opportunity, culture, and beauty, now is a great time to come and pay a visit to the city of Saskatoon.
Saskatoon is a city connected by bridges and divided by race. It has the largest urban population of Aboriginal people in a province with the highest youth incarceration rate in North America. In Saskatchewan, a young Aboriginal man is more likely to go to jail than finish high school.
It's okay, girls. It's okay. It's okay.
We're just one of the babysitters for now.
Few people understand the history behind the statistics, and many don't care.
What are your conditions?
No drinking, no weapons.
Okay. What else?
Oh, you're going to search me for a weapon?
Yeah, I am too.
Don't be nervous, man.
Okay, you got a curfew on you?
Not that I know of.
Okay, Mike, keep your hands in your pocket, buddy. Hands in your pocket. Okay, what's going to happen here is that you're going to stay exactly put, all right, until the other car gets here, and then I'm just going to patch you for weapons, check and see if you've got a curfew, all right? Nothing sudden or I'll put you on the ground, you understand? Understand that, eh?
Aboriginal people in the prairies have coped with assaults led by the church and the Canadian government, residential school abuse, discriminations in the Indian Act, racism, and despair. These are the people the Saskatoon police meet on a nightly basis.
So Dan Hatchin and Ken Munson of the Saskatoon Police Service, they're a bunch of big old assholes. In January 2000, Daryl Knight, an Indigenous man, was dropped off on the outskirts of Saskatoon. He had walked for a couple of miles and then was able to get to the nearby Queen Elizabeth Power Station to call a taxi and had suffered no ill effects. He later, a couple days later, met up with Saskatoon police over another incident and told them about his experience with Dan Hatchin and Ken Munson. And anyway, this launched an investigation, and the two officers involved basically claimed that they had simply given Daryl Knight a ride home and dropped him off at his own request. But, well, the reality was it was an unlawful confinement that occurred in September 2001, and they were sentenced to 8 months in prison. Yeah, it was the subject actually of a National Film Board documentary called Two Worlds Colliding by Tasha Hubbard.
As soon as I got outside, I seen two cops, and they must have thought I was the one causing the problems or something. Handcuffed me and took me to the car, and I'm thinking I didn't break no laws, so I didn't do nothing wrong, and took me away. And they drove me out of town. Scared the heck out of me. I thought I was dead. All those rumors I heard in the past, they were all coming true. When they told me, Daryl, get the heck out, well, they swore out, you effing Indian. I told them, I'll freeze to death out here, you guys. And they stopped. You can hear the tires crunching on the snow. And I can hear the electric window go down. And I remember that driver there said, that's your effing problem. And they drove away.
Daryl Knight's experience, as well as the experience from a number of other Indigenous people who were, I guess, found at the outskirts of the city in various locations. It was a thing that they wanted to look into to kind of get to the bottom of, because this was a recurring thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for some context about how a lot of Saskatoon and I guess Saskatchewan people view our Indigenous populations. It's a very racist place. Joni Mitchell, a lot of people in Saskatoon don't like her because she called us out on the city's racism. If you flash back to our Colton Boushie episode, after Colton was murdered, there were local politicians saying that the only problem was that the shooter had left witnesses, and this was coming from like local politicians.
Yeah, it was super fucked up.
So, I mean, the general attitude towards Indigenous people here sucks, and we've kind of got a clip here that we've got from the Two Worlds Colliding documentary, which really highlights this fact.
Constables Ken Munson and Dan Hatchin admit to abandoning Daryl Knight in the cold at the edge of town. As the case progresses, emotions run high in the city of Saskatoon. Thoughts that usually remain unsaid are now in the open.
Why are these two taking the blame for everyone that's dead? Blame. It's not their fault that everyone's dead.
They're just lucky that Daryl Knight found a phone to phone a cab.
Daryl Knight, please. What about his arrest record? What about the trouble that man's been in?
Does that mean he should die?
No, that doesn't mean he should die. Nobody should die. No one at all should have to die.
Your
and
kind
pay the
of
price.
racism is what I've been fighting.
No,
all
I'm
my
not
life.
racist because my friends are Indian as well.
Anyone that says I'm not
my
best friends are Indian. Racist.
But sure,
Some
I
of
may
my
have.
best friends are Indian.
Some
too.
of my friends are, and yeah, I have a certain amount of racism because I've dealt with enough of native that have caused me nothing but hell and havoc. Broke into my homes.
White
okay?
people have done that to me.
Well,
my nose is broken. I have.
How many beers do you drink, and how much bingo do you do?
Body.
And how much welfare are you guys on?
So yeah, how about that? Hey, she includes the "I'm not racist, I have Indian friends," and then follows it up with a straight up "I have a little bit of racism."
I'm maybe just a little bit.
A little bit racist, maybe. And yeah, so that's
how many beers do you drink, and how much welfare are you on?
Yeah,
and like speaking as a white guy in Saskatchewan, like for some reason, other white guys seem to have a habit of like, when they get comfortable with me, they'll like confess like their racist feelings to me.
Oh yeah, me too.
It's happened over and over and over again where I start to get to know somebody at a job or at a social event or something like that, and all of a sudden they'll start to speak about, man, all these fucking natives are ruining the town, eh? Like, and like they confide in me their bigoted feelings, and like it gave me the impression that so many people out there just have racism just under the surface.
I get that too. Like at work. I work up north, and I work with quite a few older white men, and after they hang out with me for a bit, and if I haven't like said anything about my beliefs, they just start being like, "Oh, these fucking Indians, blah blah. My sister owns a rental, and they just cut up deer. These fucking Indians, no one should rent to them, blah 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 blah." And then I, depending on how drunk I am at the time of the encounter, I either yell at them or I pretend that I have to go wash my hair. Yucky, super fucked up.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, you don't have to scratch terribly hard beneath the surface of a lot of the people here to get their beliefs, or I guess to have them expose their
to have them come to the fore.
Racist beliefs. So, yeah, Saskatoon police are certainly no exception to this. They, I guess, seem to have a habit of taking Indigenous people, dropping them off out on the outskirts of the city, often in freezing weather.
Right after the T-Pain and Nelly concert, we went for some drinks afterwards because, just because it was a date night. And my significant other was waiting inside for me. I mean, I'm not too big of a smoker, but I went outside for a cigarette, decided to have a cigarette. And I was approached by a black SUV with two police officers inside. I don't really know the names. I don't remember their faces. I was quite inebriated, but that's nothing to do with it. They had no right to do what they did. I had cab money. I wasn't being belligerent or rude in any way. I complied with them because, I mean, as a coach, you got to do a CPIC every 6 months to attend the summer and winter games. So I complied with their orders. And they told me to get in a vehicle. They told me to, I was under the impression we were going downtown, and next thing you know, we're on Circle Drive and heading to the outskirts of town, which would be Preston and Highway 11. Last thing I remember was, them kind of, belittling me and driving away. I felt humiliated and betrayed, and I've never felt that before. So it's all new to me. I mean, yeah, it wasn't okay. I mean, how long has this been going on? How many people has this happened to? What, they haven't come forward. It's not okay. We need to address this situation.
There was a Mr. Nastis and Mr. Wagner. There was a Lloyd Dustyhorn in January 2000, a Darcy Dean Ironchild in February of 2000, and with the subject of this episode, Neil Stonechild, in November of 1990. The investigations into the deaths of Dustyhorn, Ironchild, and Nastis were concluded, and it was determined that there basically wasn't enough evidence to press any sort of charges.
Of course not.
Of course not. The Minister of Justice had then, upon finding this out, had ordered a coroner's inquest into these 3 deaths. These inquests had been completed by the time Stonechild's inquest had also been done. So investigation into the death of Mr. Stonechild was concluded, and it was initially determined that there was not sufficient evidence to lay charges against the police officers who were last seen with him. However, there was evidence that Mr. Stonechild had contact with members of the Saskatoon Police Service the day he was last seen alive. So there was the Neil Stonechild inquiry, which was conducted to look into this matter, but the inquiry was not given any authority to make a civil or criminal determination in liability. So it's basically they just go out there, interview people, look up whatever they can find, get all the facts together, and make a determination as to what exactly happened. But they had no capacity to discipline or direct
or really do anything about it.
do anything. Just get all the information out there so we've got it compiled.
And just say yeah, Nate.
Yeah, so like I said, no civil liability could be determined by this inquiry, no criminal liability either.
And that that's just more of the thin blue line old boys club. Like, the threshold to quote unquote suspect a citizen of wrongdoing is so much lower than to suspect an officer of wrongdoing, because how could that happen? They're such good people, moral people. They would never do that.
No, of course not.
Neil Stonechild and the Starlight Tours. It's been 10 years since the anniversary of Justice David Wright's report into the inquiry into the death of Neil Stonechild. The Starlight Tours were allegations that police dumped troublesome and drunk Aboriginal men on the outskirts of the city. Neil Stonechild was 17 when he went missing on a stormy winter night in 1990. His body was found 5 days later in a field on the outskirts of the city. Daryl Knight came forward 10 years later to say that he'd been dumped on the outskirts of town on a freezing night. It was the same weekend that 2 other Aboriginal men were found frozen to death in the same area. The matter resulted in an inquiry, a public inquiry into the death of Neil Stonechild.
So about the inquiry itself, there was 43 days of hearings held throughout the province. Evidence included testimony of 63 witnesses, and there was 197 exhibits. In all, if you take all the transcripts and evidence and everything that inquiry produced, there was 8,506 pages of it for you.
Fuck.
So this is certainly a research-heavy episode because I wrote it.
The inquiry is what, 8,000 pages?
8,500.
8,500 pages. He went through that just to try and get a good definitive view of this case. So patreon.com/OVpod. We're putting in hours for you guys.
Yep.
Yes, it was a lot of research, and
we had a lot of furious long paragraphs
in our group
in our group chat at 3 a.m.
being like, what the fuck, how did this happen? Why didn't anyone do anything? And I'm like, it should make you enraged as well as educated, as well as maybe entertained.
Yeah.
It's what we're here for. So anyway, the inquiry had found that there'd be no evidence that the Saskatoon Police Service had received any formal written complaint against any of its members in relation to the Stonechild matter. So nobody formally wrote the police service to complain about the handling of Neil Stonechild's, case. That said, the inquiry had found that there were a number of complaints received by the police service, including information that was provided to members of the police service by Jason Roy, who was Neil Stonechild's friend, who gave that night that Stonechild went missing, he gave the police the fake name of Tracy Lee Horse. Complaints from the Stonechild family were actually literally published on the front page of the Star Phoenix, which is like Saskatoon's daily city newspaper.
Yeah.
Basically complaining about the adequacy of the investigation into Neil Stonechild's death. And even internal complaints by the members of the Saskatoon Police Service were later to be found out. However, because I guess nobody had formally written to the police service with a formal complaint, the complaint process that was mandated at the time under the Police Act in Saskatchewan was never actually initiated by the Saskatoon Police Service in response to any of these complaints, both internally from officers, from Stonechild's friends and family, or what was actually literally published in the newspaper.
So because they didn't write a proper letter with the proper words in it and sent through the proper channels, that all these mountains of evidence were basically just fuck it.
Well, it wasn't mountains of evidence, it was mountains of complaints.
Mountains of
complaints. But
complaint,
it was, and they were just well, no one formally complained in writing as Amanda, so we're not going to look into this.
No one sent in letters with stamps.
It's excuse via bureaucracy. Was there injustice done or not? Not did they complain in the correct avenues, using the correct formats?
Using the special form that they need to get.
Yeah, that's not how we should do justice. That's bullshit. Yeah.
So, according to evidence provided at the inquiry about the night that Neil Stonechild was last seen alive, Constable Larry Hartwig and Constable Bradley Singer of the Saskatoon Police Service were dispatched to remove Stonechild from the Snowberry Downs apartment complex, a few blocks away from my house, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The complaint was called in by a Trent Ewert. This fact was irrefutably established in the inquiry as police records and witness testimony and the officer's own notebooks all acknowledge that this is what happened. So the police were dispatched. 5 minutes after they were dispatched, they were on scene based on the electronic police records that they had kept at the time. At 11:59, it's found that they run a search on Stonechild and find he has outstanding warrants. At 12:17 a.m., they report back to the police station or whatever as being in service and ready for the next call. At 12:18 a.m., Constable Hartwig and Constable Singer are sent to investigate a suspicious person on O'Regan Crescent, a few blocks away from the Snowberry Downs apartments. They report to be on scene at 12:24 a.m., 6 minutes later. Now, here's the fun fact. It does not take 6 minutes to go from Snowberry Down to O'Regan Crescent. Even if you catch the only red light on the way, you will still make it there before 6 minutes.
Right.
So at 12:27, they report to be in service again. So from 12:24 to 12:27, they conducted their call on O'Regan. Then at 12:30, they run a search on the name of Trent Ewert, the person who had originally called in the complaint at Snowberry Downs. Hartwig was the most senior of the officers. In the inquiry, Hartwig had remembered responding to an assault complaint, which had originated at a nightclub. He also recalled attending a residence to notify a woman that her husband had killed their 2 young sons and then himself. And now one could understand why you would remember that second call.
Right. That's
a big
big one.
deal.
Yeah.
Especially in Saskatoon. Like that's not a every week occurrence.
Well, it's like in also 1990 Saskatoon.
Yeah, like it's like, hey, miss, your husband killed your kids and then himself. Like that's a big thing. That's a big fucking deal. You can remember that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of weird that he would remember the first call about the assault at a nightclub, because that was a pretty unremarkable call. It's probably some drunk guys getting into a fight or whatever. And
I've been assaulted at several nightclubs. It's
exactly.
Never called the police about it, but
Yeah, but
I work as a bouncer. Me too.
Yeah, so he remembered that assault call and he remembered the other call. But further to that, Hartwig claimed that he had no recollection of the events of 24th, except for those 2 calls noted above, and he denied that Stonechild was in the car the night of November 24th / 25th of 1990. Now, despite noting that Stonechild was in his notebook and reviewing his notes from his notebooks from that night, it didn't help him recall that event when he was at the inquiry. So his mind didn't remember the Stonechild thing at all.
It's like it never happened.
Even though he had time to go over his notebooks.
Yeah, even despite going over your notebooks.
Mr. Commissioner, the next witness is Constable Larry Hartwig.
Did you, sir, have Neil Stonechild in your custody on November 24th or 25th of 1990?
No, I did not.
Is it possible, sir, that you mistakenly had him in your custody in the sense that perhaps he was in your custody, gave you a false name, and you didn't realize it was Neil Stonechild? Do you think that's possible?
No, I do not believe that's possible.
You were talking to the RCM police about the death of people, right? Human beings.
Correct.
Frozen to death. Right? Inexplicably.
Correct.
And there was some suggestion at that point in time, even in the media, that there was some kind of involvement by the Saskatoon Police Service.
Correct.
You were quite aware of that?
Yes, I was.
So you didn't try for a moment to downplay the seriousness of this. You knew, going into your discussions with Staff Sergeant Lyons, that this is a serious situation.
Absolutely.
Right. And so you turned the conversation to the death of Neil Stonechild, right?
I turned the conversation to Neil Stonechild. Sergeant Lyons turned the conversation to the death of Neil Stonechild.
Now, am I missing something here? Isn't that the same thing?
Apparently so.
Is that the same thing?
No, it's not.
All right.
Why would you even raise the name of Neil Stonechild? Isn't that what you're asking, Mr.
I was trying to get to that.
What earthly reason would there be for you to mention the name Neil Stonechild in this context?
Because I knew the RCMP were investigating the death of Neil Stonechild. They asked me about people I did not know about. The only person that I knew was Neil Stonechild.
So when he was asked about reporting at scene that night, he indicated they must have pressed it while they were in the area, as opposed to actually being at the scene. So, you're supposed to push it when you arrive.
Yeah.
But they were kind of close enough, so they just pushed it as they were close,
Just ish, yeah.
I wonder if citizens are allowed to do that. Like if a prosecutor brings forward and say, hey, the cell tower pinged off your cell phone, you can just be like, oh, I just fudged it. I just drove by. They're being given a level of scrutiny that's way lower than if a citizen was in the same situation.
Like even reporting into work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I may have been half an hour late, but it was close enough to on time, so so it's on time, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Also of note is that his notes didn't actually make any reference to the original complainant, which was Trent Ewert, which is also kind of interesting that he didn't note that, despite him running a search against them.
Yeah.
So, it's like, well, I'm going to run a search on this guy and see if he's got any warrants, but I'm not going to write anything down about him in my notebook.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So anyway, the temperature that night was minus 28 Celsius. For our American friends, that is minus 18.5 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's cold.
It's cold.
And for people that haven't lived in a cold environment like this, Saskatchewan is also very flat. So that cold is often accompanied by very swift winds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the chances of hypothermia skyrocket, like in Saskatchewan, because you're subject to both the cold temperatures and the winds to cool your body down just that much faster.
Well, and also, like, you breathe in and your nose hairs freeze, and you breathe out and they thaw. Like that's...
Yeah, and your glasses fog up, and you take your scarf off, and it's got like caked ice on it because of the condensation of your breath.
That's right.
Freezing up against the fabric. So like it gets fucking cold here.
Yeah.
Anyway, Constable Hartwig had agreed that a warrant for the arrest of Stonechild was on the system on November 24/25th, 1990. He testified that if he had encountered Stonechild, he would have arrested him and taken him to detention because, you find a guy, he's got a warrant, he's in your custody.
Take him to jail.
Take him to jail.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
He's got some administrative business that needs to be looked after at the police station.
Yeah, that's supposed to be part of the checks and balances so that abuse by, like, corrupt cops can't be done. Because there's cameras and other accountability and shit at the station. Or at least that's the way it should be.
Exactly. The timing of them running the name of the original complainant, Trent Ewert, was also curious, given that they had cleared Stonechild, or they had cleared the Stonechild matter 13 minutes earlier. So it's like this guy complained about Stonechild. We got there. Now we've just finished up with our business here. We've cleared it. We're back in station now, or we're back in service now. And then we're going to run the name of the guy who originally called in the complaint. Well, it seems like kind of weird because, you think before you flip back into service, you would
do that work.
You would do all that work before.
Yeah.
So 13 minutes later, after clearing him, they ran a search on Trent's name. Hartwig had no recollection of the event he responded to on Oregon either. Furthermore, from 12:30 a.m. to 1:39 a.m., over an hour, there was no activity on the police record system from Constable Hartwig and Constable Sanger. Their notebooks also silent, no names were run, no evidence of where they were, what they were doing. Now, like, imagine being a cop and getting, like, no late-night calls on Saskatoon's west side for over an hour.
That's not happening.
You're just driving around?
Yeah.
Yeah. For those of you that aren't familiar, it's, like, petty crime is happening in Saskatoon, like, a lot. Because there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of, like, there's a lot of discrimination. There's a lot of inequality creating crime, like, within the city. There's not a proper support structure. So, like, on any given night, there should be a lot of crime happening around that time.
Well, like, I have the cop app, and you can see when crime happens and where it happens, and there's no way that it would be an hour without
somebody calling on the west side, which is where they were patrolling that night.
Yeah.
So for over an hour, there was absolutely no activity with these officers.
Jason Roy was apparently right at this intersection here, so I would have talked to Jason Roy, right? Because I would have been driving the car that night. Well, I don't remember any of this. Yeah, I don't remember even taking the call, right? There's no doubt we did. I mean, it's written in my notebook, so we obviously took the call. Wow. So, I mean, I wrote the alias that Jason Roy used in my notebook, Tracy Lee Horse. There's a reason why he was run twice on CPIC, and it's probably because nothing came back up under the alias, right? So I challenged him. Again, I don't have any recollection, but this is my normal practice. This is what we do, right? We ran Neil's name because, I mean, it's normal to run the subject of the call on CPIC while you're en route or when you arrive at scene. At scene is not a literal designation all the time. I might be at scene of a car accident and never see the accident. I might be at scene 3 blocks away directing traffic. We arrived at scene here. So the first question somebody would ask is, how could we already have Neil Stonechild in custody when we were at scene?
The evidence all indicates that. The fact that I was duped into believing the possibility that I might have encountered Neil Stonechild was only as a result of my faith in the RCMP that they were competent, honest, and fair.
second question.
But again, when in the absence of information, a person can and will adopt erroneous information as fact.
This spot in particular, it's a very traumatizing spot for me. I've never actually sat in this stood here ever since that night. And the cop was looking at me right here and asking me questions, and Neil's in the back, bloody face, asking for my help, and Neil was sitting there with his back, his hands behind his back, just yelling at me, man, help me, help me, help me. These guys are gonna kill me, and I was just like, relax, man, relax. Everything's all right, man. You're gonna go back to jail. That's it. That's all. Just calm down. And he was fucking terrified, man. And I really didn't put it together until he was gone. And it really didn't make that much sense to me. Like, I was so young at that time, and I just didn't know how to put it together. And it just bothered the shit out of me. I don't know.
Fast forward to March of 2000, Hartwig is getting interviewed on the death of Neil Stonechild. The investigator who's looking into this is interviewing Hartwig. Hartwig says they were going to a call of a suspicious person of a B&E in progress, the break and enter. They found Neil. He was drunk at the time. Now, Hartwig said that he gathered this information from newspaper reports that he had reviewed prior to meeting with the investigator. Now, the investigator makes no reference to Hartwig getting the info from the newspaper. Constable Hartwig also testified that he read the name Tracy Lee Horse in the newspaper. It was found in cross-examination that such information did not appear in newspaper reports, nor did it appear in any media presented to the inquiry.
Interesting. That.
So he learned all this stuff that he had forgotten. And he learned it through reviewing media at the time, the newspaper. And,
that didn't actually exist.
That didn't actually mention, the names of Tracy Lee Horse, despite using the name Tracy Lee Horse in the interview.
Weird. It's almost like he knew only stuff that somebody involved would know.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the end, the inquiry found, and quote, I cannot accept that Constable Hartwig simply forgot about the search for Stonechild when he learned of the death, or that he failed to recognize the complaint might have some significance to the investigation into Stonechild's death. In all of the circumstances, his assertion that he did not recall what happened is simply not credible. I conclude that he recalled what happened, and his assertions are a deliberate deception designed to conceal his involvement. So this inquiry, which cannot lay any criminal or civil liability, just found Hartwig to I guess, summarize it. They're calling him a fucking liar.
Yeah, they basically called him the fuck out.
Yeah, so he's a fucking liar, just saying shit to try to hide his involvement in this.
Yeah. I think what's lost in reading through this is Hartwig, was it?
Yes.
From what I read from reading through this argument, like he was considered like a senior officer, like an officer to set the exaple for the juniors, to like, to teach and guide and shape the young officers.
Yeah.
A mentor.
Yeah.
This is guy that's setting the example.
Well, and that's what I'm moving to now. Is Hartwig's partner that night, Bradley Singer, was the newbie. He joined the police service in January of that year, so he was on there for less than a year.
Little baby cop.
Little baby cop, exactly. Constable Singer had recorded the complaint involving Stonechild in his notebook. So Hartwig didn't write it down, but Singer did in his notebook. There were no other names recorded. Constable Singer had testified that he had no recollection of the events of November 24th and 25th of 1990, other than his involvement of notifying the woman about the death of her husband and two sons. He denied transporting Neil Stonechild to the North Industrial Area of Saskatoon. He also denied that he had any knowledge as to who did take Stonechild there.
Also, the North Industrial Area is far the fuck away from any public transit. It's all just a bunch of like warehouse buildings.
Yeah.
Even in
buses don't go there.
Even in 2020, buses still don't really go there.
No,
after
buses
a
don't go
certain
there.
hour.
No.
It's dead. There's no, it's just industrial businesses that run, like
9 to 5.
9 to 5 or 6 to 6 or
Anyone
6
there
to
is
7.
working a late shift
or doing drugs.
Or doing drugs.
Like there's really
Not even. There are better places to do drugs.
yeah.
than the
There's
North
nothing
End.
there, outside of regular operating hours.
Well, like they picked him up on the west side and brought him all the way the fuck over to the north end, which is very far away from anything that he'd probably,
yeah,
be familiar with.
Yeah, it's way the fuck out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So Singer was on the day shift of November 29th, 1990. When he received a call advising that a body, which turned out to be a body of Neil Stonechild, had been found. Sanger stated that he did not recall many details. He didn't recall any of the press surrounding Stonechild's death. Now, this may seem normal and inconsequential, but imagine you encounter someone one night and then days later find out that their frozen body was found literally on your next shift.
Yeah.
Like, you don't think that kind of information would be etched in your brain. Your experience with that person would...
Yeah, no, that sounds like bullshit. I still remember shit that happened on shifts from jobs like 3 jobs ago.
Fuck, I remember like a bunch of shifts from like working at Burger King. Like
I remember shifts from working at Claire's when I was 16 years old. Like that's bullshit.
And especially like that can like amplify the experience in your mind. Like I remember in high school sitting behind somebody that killed themselves. And I remember like their name and face is etched in my memory just because like I learned about that later just from my small interaction with them. So this cop should have like been like, holy shit, especially since it was only a couple days before.
Yeah.
He and Hartwig were searching for Stonechild just days earlier, and when anybody had last seen him, it was at Snowberry Downs. After Neil Stonechild went missing and was later found frozen, they did not approach the officer who was investigating the death. Like, you think anyone investigating, would have wanted to know about, your interaction with Stonechild those days earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, nada.
That's fucked up.
You've got your coworkers were last seen with this guy days earlier, and then now you're investigating his death. You don't think you would have talked to your coworkers, or the coworkers would have been like, "Hey, man, we had this guy in our custody.
Yeah, I remember this guy.
2 days ago. Would you, can we help you out?
Well, and detectives are taught, and police are taught that any small information could lead to a break in a case, and they're taught to say the same thing to the public. So they already know, they would have reason to come forward. Their training would dictate they come forward unless they had something to hide.
Right.
Aside from neither Singer nor Hartwig coming forward, or the investigating officer reaching out to Singer or Hartwig.
That's fucked. That's fucked up.
Singer was being interviewed in this matter on December 2001, and they had basically asked him, how good of a cop are you? Have you done anything wrong on the job? And so anyway, Singer admits to falsifying a breathalyzer reading to avoid having to administer another breathalyzer test.
Mm-hmm.
So while this wasn't relevant to Stonechild, it talks about the integrity of Bradley Singer.
Yes. He was lazy. He was a lazy fuck.
He was lazy, just whatever,
And also, falsifying a breathalyzer report, that rings of a certain police attitude I keep on running into when, certain secret chats that police revealed. The whole well, maybe they didn't commit this crime, but if they're a bad person and we convict them and get them off the streets, and we make some shit up to get them out of the city, then so be it. That whole corrupt horse shit.
Yeah.
So I guess some other interesting stuff about Constable Hartwig. On Saskatoon's 20th Street, there's an old gas station that was built in 1929. The area is a low-income area. Lots of Indigenous people live there. In 2003, the Saskatoon Police took over this old gas station building, basically in an effort to have a sort of a satellite police station in the community, where the cops can walk on the beat and that sort of thing.
Was that called Little Chief now?
The Little Chief Community Station.
It was the Little Chief Community Station. Yep.
Wow.
In the area, it was a police station basically from 2003 to 2011. And one of the officers who was assigned to this station was Constable Hartwig.
Sabo got the chief's job because of his community policing style and creates 10 new community liaison positions.
We want to make sure that whatever you guys do, we're communicating that because you guys are fighting a battle. You're fighting a battle, first of all, you know, the perception internally is, well, take the 10 officers and throw them out in the street and we'll handle crime better. So you got to fight that perception. On the other side, you got the people out in the community who are saying, well, we never see our officers. So we want to make sure we have a nice balance in there. So, but it's really important that that you guys understand this is a huge hinge pin, I suppose, for lack of a better term, for where we're going with this organization. And you guys are the ones that can set the standard.
As part of his community-based strategy, Sabo opens the Little Chief Station in the inner city. Constable Larry Hartwig is one of the new community liaison officers assigned to Little Chief.
I've worked on 3 different reserves, and I've developed a healthy respect for the Aboriginal community.
Hello, is that in?
We always have to be very, very careful as police officers because we have a tremendous amount of authority. And with that comes a tremendous amount of responsibility. We must never, ever, ever abuse our authority as police officers. We have the authority to literally destroy lives. We literally do have that authority. And we must always be careful that that authority is never, ever abused.
SIP entries on CPIC.
Let me give you a little insight into what the police subculture is. We do not identify ourselves as white, as Aboriginal, as African American or African Canadian or Asian. We choose not to, because when we become police officers, we become blue.
Holy fuck.
It's not like he misunderstands the nuance of his job. He understands and he fucking does it anyway.
Yeah.
God damn it. He understands what damage he can do and he just doesn't fucking care.
That's it. That was wild.
Well, and that's the thing is it's like, you know, this was done in like 2003, that interview. I believe it was around 2003, maybe 2002. And, you know, given his actions in November of 1990.
Yeah.
like when you know.
You can't just oops my bad out of that.
Yeah, exactly. Like what he said and how, you know, it's like, does this haunt you? Does that haunt your mind?
Yeah.
Well, of course it didn't because he forgot all about it.
Oh my God.
Apparently.
Yeah.
How do people like this, how do they convince themselves they're good people? How do they, hug their kids and think they're a good role model? How do they do it?
I don't know.
Just
push it way deep down. That was wild.
Yeah, exactly. So, finding that interview and given what the inquiry found, yeah, it's a very uncomfortable, and I'm sure he's probably living with some interesting, cognitive dissonance on that.
Yep.
When the RCMP began its investigation into the death of Neil Stonechild, the RCMP had requested Saskatoon police records on the matter. Anyway, the official copy of this file, which included the officers' reports who responded, had been destroyed.
Of course it was.
All that remained of the official Saskatoon Police Service file in relation to the investigation of Neil Stonechild's death was a very basic indexing information about the file. The paper copy, gone. It was destroyed in 1998. Now, here's the thing about the destruction of police files. The police have a records retention policy of 10 years. So 8 years in, they destroy the file.
That's not 10 years.
Despite having a policy to destroy files after 10. Yeah. So when questioned as to why this file was destroyed after 8, despite a retention policy of 10 years, the police said that they needed to destroy the file to make room for renovations to the police station, their storage facilities. So because they had classified Stonechild's file as a sudden death, not a homicide, boom, there
Gone.
we go. It's
Who
gone.
cares?
It,
Yeah.
It's he was there. He died.
Who gives a shit?
It's done.
Yep.
On to the next case.
So anyway, this guy, Ernie Lutit, happened to be a cop back in the 90s.
Good old Indian Ernie.
And he also happened to make a paper photocopy of this file shortly after Stonechild's body was found. And all this information was coming forward. So anyway, the inquiry kind of looked at his file, and they felt, based on all the information that was in the file and the timelines of everything and the investigation and all that other stuff, in addition to the other police records that were provided, the inquiry had found that this file that Ernie had copied to be they felt it was complete and accurate and credible, and that everything that was there was there.
Sure.
René Lademosière was a veteran officer. He was dispatched to the scene of Stonechild's body at 12:54 and had reported to be on the scene 4 minutes later. People in the area had directed him to the body of Stonechild. René confirmed the death and radioed back to dispatch. He searched the scene for evidence of foul play and would relay anything found back to dispatch. He followed Stonechild's footsteps back to a gravel parking lot where they had disappeared. The disturbance in the snow suggested that Stonechild had fallen before walking south to where his body was later found. They concluded that Stonechild had been intoxicated, but they later testified that the steps were fairly straight, as opposed to a drunken stagger. Stonechild was missing a shoe, and they sent the canine unit to go looking for the missing shoe, but they were unsuccessful.
Can you imagine being out in the snow in the freezing ass cold? You're kind of tipsy. You're in a place where you have no idea where you are. You're missing a shoe. Can you imagine how scared you would feel? Like, I can't imagine.
And you're 17 years old.
Yes, and you're like a little baby.
Exactly.
And we're not going into super depth about other Saskatoon freezing cases, but there's a pattern of victims of this saying that the cops took away their shoes, took away their jacket, took away stuff before dropping them off.
Pretty sure there's literally a Wikipedia page on Saskatoon freezing deaths.
There it is, yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, so the Constable Lademosière stated that there was no reason to call in an investigator as there was no sign of foul play. However, he agreed that it was an unusual situation and a body in an unusual location. How did Stonechild get there? He noted the footprints in the snow appeared to be several days old.
How did he get there? I don't know. He just walked over from the west side
Just
with
sort
one
of
shoe.
showed up in this isolated north end industrial area in the middle of nowhere in freezing winter. Just poof.
And with just
lost
happened.
a shoe.
Yeah,
just got in some shenanigans, walked several miles in deadly cold. Just.
Well, I don't know if we walked several miles, but yeah,
that's what they want us to believe with the official report. Right?
Later in an interview with the RCMP, he referred to Constable Hartwig as a very aggressive individual who suffered from small man syndrome.
He definitely looked like that.
Yes. So officers found 2 scrapes across the bridge of Stonechild's nose and a cut into Stonechild's lower lip. When they removed his clothing at the morgue, a stone was found in his left shoe, the one that wasn't missing, and it had left an impression suggesting that it had been in his shoe for some time. They did not send Stonechild's clothing to a crime lab for analysis, which would have been commonplace in a homicide investigation, but remember, they flagged it as a sudden death.
Yeah, it was just like a real weird accident.
Yeah. So January 12th, 1993, Stonechild's clothing was destroyed as they had not received a request for clothing from the family. So, your loved one passes and, the police are involved and they take the clothing and you can request it back when they're done their investigation.
Yeah, but who the fuck knows that?
Well, the family didn't request it back. But it's also notable that the police practice with regards to exhibit destruction, particularly with clothing, was that it would normally just automatically be returned to the family.
Oh.
So by default, they should have given the clothing back to the family.
Right.
But they did not. They destroyed it.
Weird.
Yeah, strange, eh?
Yeah.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah, so, and it was always practice to obtain clearance from the family before destroying clothing.
Yeah.
So, we got your family for it. Well, we don't want it. Okay, well, can we destroy it? And the family says, yeah, go for it. We don't want, his shirt or whatever.
Which makes sense. If you want to do the community-based policing thing, you should make sure that, a dead loved one's belongings, get taken care of, that you do to them what the family wants.
Right.
Staff Sergeant Jarvis worked for the police for several decades. He was assigned to the investigation of Stonechild's death. This assignment occurred after the body was in the morgue at around 8:10 p.m., approximately 7 hours after the first responder attended the scene of Stonechild's body. Jarvis had attended the morgue. He did not examine Stonechild's body, but obtained a thumbprint for ID purposes. Jarvis's explanation for not examining the body was that he had no medical training. Now, Jarvis had been on the police for several decades.
Jesus.
So as a trained and experienced investigating officer, he was quite capable of examining the body as it lay disrobed on the autopsy table.
Right.
He ID'd the body of Neil Stonechild, and at 9:45 p.m., Sergeant Jarvis attended the residence of Miss Stonechild to notify her of the death of her son.
That's such a weird excuse. That's part of the investigation job, is examining the body, or at least,
cops have that in their training. Cops can look at bodies and be like, oh, this speckle pattern meant that he was dragged across this kind of gravel kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? They should know, and they should look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the family had told Jarvis that Neil was last seen on November 24th, 1990 at approximately 9 p.m. At the time, he was with Jason Roy. Stonechild was staying with Pat Pickard, who later told Jarvis that they last saw him approximately at 10 p.m. on the evening of November 24th, and that he had indicated his intention to return home the next day.
Right.
Midnight on November 29th, Sergeant Jarvis filed his report on Stonechild and his actions that day. Crime Stoppers tip was received November 30th at 4:42 p.m., suggesting that Neil was taken to the area of 57th Street and beaten and left there by Danny and Gary Pratt.
Wow.
The tip suggested that the reason for the beating was that Neil was fooling with Gary Pratt's girlfriend. The evidence with regards to injuries to Stonechild suggests that there was no truth to that report. He was not beaten severely.
No, he had a scrape and a cut on his lip. Yeah.
That said, there was no indication that Jarvis actually followed up on this report. So the tip came in, and he just said, nah. Just didn't even look into it.
He's just like, whatever.
Yeah. Another constable raised concerns about issues between Pratt and Stonechild, but Jarvis never looked at that file either. His explanation was this was something that had happened sometime before.
Yeah, people don't hold grudges.
Yeah.
No.
That's not a thing.
No.
So Jarvis became aware of Hartwig and Singer's involvement with Stonechild on the 24th. Checking the calls dispatched, I learned that Constable Hartwig had attended at this residence at approximately 23:56 hours and cleared at 1700 hours on November 25th, 1990, being unable to locate the deceased. So why would he check the dispatcher's calls for November 24th and 25th when all he really knew was that a dead body had been found?
Right. Yeah.
So in testimony about this fact, and following up with Hartwig and Singer, Jarvis suggested that there may have been additional police reports made on the matter involving Stonechild, which had also been destroyed. However, there were no other reports, and the inquiry found multiple contradictory statements being provided by Jarvis.
Yikes.
Jason Roy had contacted Sergeant Jarvis and advised him that he was with Neil most of the day and evening of November 24th. Sergeant Jarvis had arranged to meet with Jason Roy. The meet lasted for 55 minutes while Roy had completed a longhand written statement. Jarvis made no notes of their meeting. He insisted all the conversation during this meeting was contained in this longhand statement. The statement written by Jason Roy was not even 400 words long.
Mm-hmm.
It was like 55 minutes for less than 400 words. So it's like 7 or 8 words written per minute.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, so for the sake of comparison, Jarvis later met with Trent Ewert at 10 p.m. that night, obtained a statement that was a page long, and was only present with Trent Ewert for 10 minutes to produce that statement. So, like, why did it take Jarvis so long to get a written statement, a 400-word written statement?
It's less than 2
Jason
pages.
Wright?
Yeah.
Like,
and like my scripts for this podcast are frequently like 8 to 12 pages long. Like if some dumbass researching half-ass shit for a podcast has a longer statement than you, somebody who's involved in the investigation, something's wrong.
That's right. That's right.
Jarvis filed his investigation report suggesting that Stonechild was going to turn himself in, and he was walking to the correctional center on 60th Street, but was intoxicated and fell asleep and froze. Notable is that there was absolutely no basis for this conclusion.
That's insane.
Yeah, so like when he was questioned by the RCMP on the matter, Jarvis had agreed with the RCMP that it would not make sense for a young offender to turn himself into the correctional center.
That's way the fuck in the middle of nowhere. Like, how would you get there? At night, right?
Yeah, and said that the weather that night and being in that area of the city was very feasible. And basically, the inquiry found this to be absolutely preposterous.
Yeah.
That Stonechild would just go to turn himself in at a correctional center in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah, in the middle of Warehouse City in the North End.
Editing Ood here. I just wanted to emphasize just how out of the way Neil Stonechild would have had to have gone in order for his travel to meet the police's theory of the story. That is, him going to the correctional center at the far north part of town to turn himself in, and he fell asleep on the way and died in the cold, rather than the version of events that have the police forcefully confining and bringing Neil Stonechild there. It's walking across the entire city in the dead of winter, in the middle of the night. It's literally over 10 kilometers of walking. And this isn't an area where buses went to. As we emphasized in the beginning of the episode, there was no residential houses here. There was no parks. There was no restaurants. There was no leisure centers. It was warehouses and industry in the North End. Just trucking yards and warehouses. There was nothing up there. And the police purport that he walked all the way there in the middle of the night, in the dead of winter, wearing only one shoe. That's the story they want you to buy. Anyways, back to these guys.
Jarvis testified that Saskatoon's industrial North End was an area frequented by people late at night who would likely be involved in crimes, as well as late shift workers, etc. So it was often a very busy area for Saskatoon police.
No, that sounds like bullshit. Sorry.
Yeah. So December 5th, Jarvis spoke to people who had last interacted with Stonechild on the evening of November 24th. And he also spoke to a pathologist on the case who indicated that while they figured the body had been there for at least 48 hours, it was possible the deceased died on November 25th. And given that he spent the day talking to people about Stonechild who last saw him on the 24th, you think he would have connected these dots to say, hey, what was going on the 24th and 25th?
Yeah, like an investigator would.
Like an investigator would, yeah. But he either basically ignored the statement from the pathologist about how long Stonechild had been there, or just didn't make that connection. So Jarvis,
I'm not willing to give him the benefit of that doubt.
So Jarvis concluded his file with the following note. Several Crime Stoppers tips have also been received. However, it is the opinion of the investigator that these are unfounded and directed more towards causing disharmony on the street against the Pratts. It is felt that unless something concrete by way of evidence to the contrary is obtained, the deceased died from exposure and froze to death. There is nothing to indicate why he was in the area other than possibility that he was going to turn himself into the correctional center or was attempting to follow the tracks back to the Sutherland group home, or simply wandered around drunk until he passed out from the cold and alcohol and froze, concluded at this time. That was the end of the file until the RCMP opened their investigation in 2000, about 10 years later. Jarvis had interviewed 8 witnesses, took written statements from 2 of them. The inquiry found that following the closure of the file, 2 of his fellow officers, one officer whose son was a friend of Stonechild, had contacted him about this file, indicating additional investigation should be done. Jarvis did not reopen the file.
Jarvis is fuck.
Who opens up a police file when new information is found that could change the case? Sounds dumb.
Yeah.
You should just stick with whatever you found first and don't let your mind be changed by that liberal facts. You know, like all that shit.
And boom, that's my section.
I'm going to read you the first, second, and third of 8 articles written about Neil Stonechild in Saskatoon's city newspaper, the Star Phoenix. Just as I read through these, just a reminder that there is a lot of bias in the words the journalist chose to describe Neil and his actions. I think that's very evident of the opinions of Indigenous people in Saskatoon and how Neil was described in these articles. So just a note on that, there's going to be some harsh framing. Printed in Saskatoon's newspaper, the Star Phoenix, December 1st, 1990, 3 days after the body was found. Body found in city field, identified. Saskatoon police have identified Neil Christopher Stonechild, 17, as the person whose body was found Thursday in a field in the city's north. An autopsy is expected to be conducted in the next few days to determine the cause of death. Printed March 4th in the Star Phoenix, over 3 months after Neil Stonechild's death. Family suspects foul play. Police say every avenue investigated. When Neil Stonechild's frozen body was found in a vacant field in North Saskatoon last November, family members immediately suspected foul play. 3 months later, they still subscribed to that theory, even though the police file on that case had been closed. The official cause of death was listed as hypothermia. Aside from some scratches on the nose, there were no marks of physical abuse. His blood alcohol was 0.15, almost twice the legal limit for impaired driving. Stonechild's mother, Stella, and sister, Erica, are the first to admit Neil had a problem with alcohol, but they say in the months before his death, he was coming to terms with his problem. They also say that, had Stonechild been white, police would have been more thorough in the investigation of his death. It makes me wonder, if Neil was the son of a mayor or commissioner, police would still be investigating, Stella said. A senior officer within the department guardedly agreed. But department spokesman Sergeant Dave Scott vehemently denies Stella's assessment of the investigation. Quote, "I don't agree. A tremendous amount of work went into that case," he says. Pointing to a hefty file, Scott says investigators pursued every avenue. The coroner's report said no evidence showed Stonechild, who was 17, was beaten before his death. The profile we have at this time was death by hypothermia. It was an unfortunate incident, Scott reports. Nevertheless, the Stonechild family is convinced Neil was killed. He was found November 29th, lying face down in a field behind 830 57th Street West. According to the pathologist's report, Stonechild could have died as early as November 25th. It is where the body was found that puzzles his relatives. Why was he found way up in the North Industrial area with only one shoe? asks his mother, "What kind of kid goes out with only one shoe?" The temperatures in Saskatoon the week Stonechild disappeared and until the body was found ranged from a low of -28 on November 25th to a high of 5 on November 29th. He was last seen alive November 24th at a confectionery at 33rd Street and Confederation Drive. He was very drunk. Stella and her daughter don't believe the police theory Neil was walked to the Provincial Correctional Facility to give himself up. At the time of his death, Stonechild was a fugitive from a community home, where he was serving time for a break and enter. Stella said, "I know my son very well. I know he wouldn't go out there by himself. Even though he was on the run, he always called home. It was a stormy night, November 24th. I told him please be careful. He said he was going to be all right. Even if he was so intoxicated at the 7-Eleven, how did he get to the North End?" Erica asks. "I don't know anyone. It was too late for buses to stop. There were no houses." Both women believe Stonechild was driven up to the area and abandoned. "He was thrown out there," Stella said. "I know him." She feared for her son because in the weeks before his death he had an altercation with a gang. He suffered a beating, the result of a deal gone sour over the sale of some handguns Stonechild acquired during a break and enter. "He got a licking. He was beaten with guns and baseball bats," Stella said. "Sure, he was drunk, but he had enough sense to run home. He was assaulted in a city location, but managed to stagger his way to his mother's home on Confederation Crescent." Stonechild was a familiar face to social services youth workers, who described him as a likable, pleasant boy. His major downfall was alcohol. He enrolled in Alcoholics Anonymous program a few weeks before his death and had attended regularly. He was learning that a life with alcohol was bad, but he was dealing with the issues in his life, a social worker said. He was a smart kid with a lot of potential. He had a terrific personality. He could have been anything. His death was a terrible waste. As Stella ponders the tragedy, she declares, "Not a day goes by when I don't shed a tear for my boy. It's heartbreaking to know my son is gone. I can't let him rest in peace knowing he didn't die naturally. Whoever did it is still out there." Written in the Star Phoenix, August 17th, 2000. 2 officers confronted in Stonechild freezing death. An RCMP task force has identified and approached the 2 Saskatoon police officers who supposedly last saw 17-year-old Neil Stonechild alive, say sources close to the investigation. The 2 officers were confronted by the RCMP, and they said, "Talk to the Saskatoon Police Association," the source said. Association Vice President Sergeant Dick Melanchuk confirmed the RCMP investigators spoke with several members on the Stonechild matter, but he did not know whether any of those approached were the 2 officers identified as allegedly having last contact with Stonechild. Stonechild went missing on a frigid night in November 1990, after creating a disturbance at a Saskatoon apartment building. 5 days later, on November 29th, 1990, his frozen body was identified in a field in Saskatoon's North Industrial area, near the 800 block of 57th Street. A friend, partying with Stonechild that night, has said that he watched Stonechild get driven away in a Saskatoon police patrol car. The friend, who asked not to be named, says Stonechild was screaming, "They're gonna kill me." Police, however, say that a drunken Stonechild was seen just after midnight at a convenience store at 33rd Street and Confederation Drive, contrary to the account of the friend. An autopsy determined that Stonechild died of hypothermia. Although his frozen body showed no signs of a struggle, police at the time said there were several scratches across his nose. Editor's note: stay tuned to see how truthful the statement, "no signs of a struggle," and "just some scratches" are. Back to reading. Stonechild's sister, Erica, says she examined her brother's body before burial and showed signs of a beating. He had numerous bumps all over his head and tiny little cuts. He had a gash right across his nose, diagonally from his forehead to his cheekbone, and bruises on his face, she said Wednesday. The RCMP task force is examining 7 separate cases, 5 of which involve the deaths of Native men. The task force will forward the results of its investigation to provincial justice officials, who will then recommend whether criminal charges are warranted.
Now the question arises, did Sergeant Jarvis learn that Neil Stonechild had been in police custody in November 20th or 25th? So when Jarvis was questioned by the RCMP, he suggested that he had a recollection of Jason Roy telling him that he was stopped by the police and provided a fake name. So now I would note that this was not mentioned in Jason Roy's 55-minute, 400-word or less statement. Jarvis told the RCMP that Jason Roy was quite proud of deceiving the police with a fake name when they met, and he obtained the statement. He also said that Jason would talk about seeing Stonechild in the back of a police car. Jarvis would later testify that these statements were based on, quote, false memories, saying he learned of these things during discussions with the RCMP. Kind of crazy. When the inquiry listened to the tapes of the interview with RCMP and Jarvis, they found nothing leading, inappropriate, or unfair in their interview with Jarvis. So nevertheless, the inquiry contacted memory experts who, I will summarize, indicated Jarvis was full of shit. Jarvis was an experienced officer, conducted a shitload of interviews in his career, was trained in interview and interrogation techniques, was aware of witness contamination, etc. When Jarvis was interviewed, he knew the RCMP was investigating a possible police involvement in the death of Neil Stonechild. He had known that Neil Stonechild was in police custody on November 24th, 1990, and he knew that that would be extremely significant to the investigation. So how did Jarvis learn he had a false memory? The information he gave the RCMP was not recorded in his notebook or his report. Also notable, Jarvis had also provided independently to the RCMP several recollections of matters of his investigation which were not in his notebook or report. So he's just all over the fucking place. Basically, in cross-examination, Jarvis metaphorically shit the bed as far as credible testimony goes. He didn't remember one thing, then remembered something else, then later forgetting about it, so he just waffled and flip-flopped all over the place. Basically, he left out critical information from his notes and report about Stonechild having been in police custody. What would have appeared to be incompetence now appeared to be something much more serious. So now it's kind of seeming like maybe he's got something to hide and he's just not a dumbass.
Yeah. It's not that he's it's not that he's an incompetent cop. It's that it seems like he may be a corrupt one at this point. Because it seems like it's more cover-up than forgetfulness.
That's right. So investigation of other officers at the inquiry also was concerning. A Constable Brand met with an informant in detention on November 30th around 7 p.m., and according to his notebook, the informant indicated Stonechild had concerns approximately a week before his death about his safety and that he had received threats. He then indicated he passed this information on through an internal memo which he believes was given to Saskatoon Police Service Sergeant Neil Wiley. Sergeant Wiley denied in the inquiry that he had received any information from Constable Brand. But that said, Sergeant Jarvis records receiving information from Wiley on November 30th, 1990 in his notebook.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. Even more puzzling, the note in Jarvis's book appears between 4:42 p.m. and 6:52 p.m. This was before Constable Brand met with his informant at 7 p.m. So understandably, the inquiry felt Brand's testimony to be unreliable. No shit. That was a fucking mess. Glenn Clayton Winslow was a patrol sergeant assigned to Area C, which is the north end of Saskatoon. Police records indicate he was dispatched at 5:25 a.m. on November 25th. Hartwig and Sanger were also dispatched to advise next of kin about a murder-suicide involving a father and 2 sons, like we talked about before.
Yeah, significant event.
Yeah, like a real big thing.
Yeah.
Winslow did not recall this or any contact with Sanger and Hartwig. He was also not aware of any dispatch regarding Stonechild. He testified that he spent a great deal of time as probably the only policeman in this industrial area. He said that he rarely encountered young people in the area at night, which directly contradicted Jarvis's earlier testimony about it being a busy place for police. Like, no shit, I could have fucking told you that.
Yeah, like it's you. When you don't live here, you don't realize how far out of place this area is. Like, it's away from any building areas. It's away from any residential areas. Like, it's like a work city all on its own. And
yeah, it's far away from everything. There's nothing out there except for like trucking companies and window places. Like,
and like truck car washes. Like there's
nothing out there.
There's nothing. It's like field and warehouse.
It's a ghost town. It's a ghost town at midnight.
Well, like having been a teenager on the north end, we just went and drank in parks. We just put our rum in our Slurpee cups and went to the local playground. You know, like,
you didn't hang out in the industrial section.
No.
There was nothing.
No.
You want to go hang out by the barbed wire fence outside of the giant, like, semi car wash place?
No, or you'd go down to the shack by Meewasin Park, or you'd go to someone's house. Like those, you wouldn't never go out to the fucking industrial area. Like, what do you do if you gotta pee?
Especially in the winter. That'd be cold as shit.
Yeah. That's fucking stupid. So Constable Luteet knew Stonechild's younger brother, Jake. He recalled that on December 4th, he ran into Jake, who wanted to talk to him about the death of his brother. Luteet learned that Jake had heard that Neil was at a party and got beaten up and then dropped off by the Pratts. This was also noted in his notebook and took place at 4:50 p.m. Luteet pulled the file from police records and photocopies it. This was a photocopy provided to the RCMP after the Saskatoon Police Service destroyed the original to make room for the renos that you'll recall from last episode. He then passes along the info he received from Jake at Major Crimes. The Stonechild file lived in the Morality Unit, and there was some discussion about it and if it should have been transferred to Major Crimes. He had concerns about the file and met with Stonechild's mother, but did not document the meetings as he was afraid he would be subject to discipline.
Oh, boy.
Which is sketchy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're like a cop and you're doing this like sort of side investigation on your own.
Yeah.
You know, of not... certainly not sanctioned by the department or the actual officer who's supposed to be investigating this.
So he's just kind of doing this on the side, and like because his kid knew the brother of the Neil Stonechild.
And likely this guy already has a full workload.
Yeah.
So he's doing this in addition to that.
Yeah. So Luteet felt the investigation was poorly done. No shit. He actually said that if Neil was a different person in a different social surrounding, the investigation would be much more thorough. He made a list of concerns and met with his staff sergeant. These concerns were found in his notebook on December 30th, 25 days after Jarvis closed his file. So Luteet's concerns were as follows. Why would a young offender go to the correctional center? Like we said, it's like in the middle of fucking nowhere. No public transit. It was cold as balls.
Well, when you're a young offender, you're not going to go to an adult fucking prison.
No, he would
to turn yourself in.
No,
that makes no sense, especially in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah, that's stupid.
And then you would call 911 to turn yourself in, especially like if you're inner city youth that doesn't may not have access to like transportation in the middle of winter, in the middle of night, you know.
Or cop shop. Take a bus downtown and just walk to the police station from there. Like there's
it's right downtown.
It makes no fucking sense.
Why he would go all the way to the north end? No, that's stupid. There was no effort to find Stonechild's missing shoe, nor find his baseball cap, which he was known for wearing. That was another concern. What efforts were made to establish Stonechild's activities the night he was last seen? So that was another concern.
Yeah, retracing steps to see like where he was at what time.
Mm-hmm. So Luteet met with Staff Sergeant Bolton from Major Crimes on January 7th, 1991, which was 33 days after Jarvis had already closed the file. Bolton and Luteet met for several minutes, and Bolton told him to go speak to Jarvis. Luteet met with Jarvis for 40 minutes and found Jarvis to be dismissive, and he told Luteet the matter, quote, was in hand, and that Lutit should leave the matter alone, which doesn't raise any alarm bells or red flags at all.
Oh, no, definitely. That's standard police operating procedure, right?
Exactly. Like, keep your nose out of my fucking business definitely doesn't sound sketchy.
No.
So in 92 or 93, 2 or 3 years after Stonechild was found, Lutit followed up with police records to see if anything had been done on the file. There was nothing from Major Crimes or anything about his meetings with Bolton or Jarvis. At the inquiry, Lutit testified that he never received any information or heard any rumors that Saskatoon police were involved in the death of Stonechild, and that if there were such going on, he would have followed up with the officers. At the inquiry, Major Crimes Staff Sergeant Bolton testified that the staff sergeant in charge of the morality unit would have to contact him to have the file transferred, and that it was possible that the staff sergeant in morality did not reassign the file. He also testified there was no time in his memory where the Major Crimes unit declined a file transfer from another unit. He said that he did not have any recollection of the Stonechild file, nor of the conversation with Lutit, but said that it was possible that he spoke with Lutit as per Lutit's version of events. So also of interest, a little meaty tidbit. Bolton had been disciplined by the police services in 1969 for picking up an individual and dropping them off outside of town. The individual filed a complaint which led to Bolton's discipline.
Shrug.
Yeah, and that's something that's going on in the background of all this. Like, this isn't an isolated event, like an Indigenous person or somebody of a visible minority being dropped on the outskirts of town.
It's just what they were doing. That's how they handled it. It was standard procedure.
It was a thing that maybe wasn't talked about, but everyone knew about.
Yeah, and sometimes they died, sometimes they didn't, and if they didn't die, how many of percentage-wise, how many would have the capacity to lodge like a formal complaint? As you can see, there can be a formal complaint on the fucking page of the Star Phoenix, as we mentioned, last episode.
Right.
And the police didn't follow up with it because, proper channels and you got to do this and this and
it wasn't on the right form. Yeah.
And yeah. So I mean, this is baked for decades into their operating procedure. This was baked into the whole conduct of the force.
Mm-hmm. Well, and people that probably did make complaints and then didn't have them ever followed up on was just like, don't even fucking bother. They're not going to they're going to do shit all for you.
Don't even try. Don't even push back. Don't even.
It's a waste of time.
Don't rock the boat.
Yeah.
You'll be disciplined or they'll find something to discipline you on.
Right.
And yeah.
And make no mistake about it. Some of the people that were involved in the cover-ups, some of the people that helped the case not get along properly, some of the people that are directly involved, some of the people that actually drove other people out, some of the people that agree with that as a course of action to deal with, quote-unquote, the Indigenous folks. Some of those people are still working and training people in the Saskatchewan police force today.
Yeah. Some of them are still there.
Yep.
Right in Saskatoon.
Yep.
Why is there such a neglect? Why is there such disinterest on the part of those who are in power to hear what we are telling them about our daily lives? This is what it's a matter of. I would imagine in a democracy, people speak to those in power and say, this is what's happening with me. And those in power say, oh, well, let's look at it and let's determine whether or not it's true. Maybe if you don't even believe it, you're looking into it nonetheless. Many chiefs of police in the United States who say they don't believe in racial profiling, believe in democracy, and have brought into place systems to begin looking at the issues of whether or not racial profiling does in fact exist, only to point out that in Canada, outside of Kingston, we have not got a police force that is willing to engage in the matter. And we have laws, particularly through the anti-terrorism laws, where many legal scholars have said to the federal government, you should be banning racial profiling in the law. How brown-skinned people tend to be stopped all the time. And this continues on, and despite the evidence we provide to the government, nothing seems to change. Why? There's some interesting issues around the way police look at us. And so years ago, when I used to work in the metropolitan government in Toronto, we actually did an audit. An audit was done of policing and so on. And the person who conducted the study, a white man by the name of Alan Andrews, he kind of started out on the side of the chief of police. But after he went through the study, here's one of the things he said. There was significant evidence that many police officers who are constantly in contact with the public develop strong feelings and beliefs as to the attributes of individuals based on factors such as appearance and racial background. These officers would no doubt be offended if their attitudes were described as potentially racist. Nevertheless, the same attitudes can and do produce a bias in behavior which results in unequal treatment of individuals of different cultural or racial backgrounds.
So in November and December of 1990, when this was all happening, it was reported that Eli was a patrol sergeant for Saskatoon's East Side. His adopted son was a friend of Neil Stonechild, who knew the Stonechild family before Neil's death. So Tarasov was reading the paper, and he saw Stonechild's obituary. That is how he learned of Neil's death. He was contacted by Stonechild's mom afterward, asking him to look into the investigation. At the inquiry, he didn't know if he looked in the records after being contacted by Stonechild's mother or if it was after reading the obituary. He didn't recall seeing the autopsy report or the toxicology report on the file when he accessed it. So he doesn't really remember much.
No.
Tarasov spoke to Jarvis about the matter sometime after the file was concluded. When interviewed by the RCMP, Tarasov said Jarvis was, quote, an Englishman with a colonial attitude, and that, quote, when natives were involved, he did not take it serious.
That's interesting.
Which is a lot of, again.
It's your own coworker.
Yeah.
You know.
So he said that shit about his own coworker, that he was English,
Colonial attitude sounds like a bit of a softer term for like white supremacist.
Yeah.
Am I wrong in making that leap?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So he asked Sergeant Jarvis what he thought about the file, and Sergeant Jarvis had responded, the kid went out, got drunk, went for a walk, and froze to death. How fucking callous is that?
Yeah.
Yuck. So Tarasov advised Stonechild's mother to contact a lawyer who might have success in getting additional investigation done. He testified to the inquiry that he did not hear anything about the police being involved in Stonechild's disappearance. So he was obviously on the outs with those main clique of officers who clearly knew everything that was going on.
As it is often the case, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're going to rock the boat, well, we're just not going to include you.
Well, exactly. He seemed like he was maybe a quote unquote good apple in the bunch of cops.
ACAB except for Tarasov and Looted.
Yeah, ACAB except for those guys.
Yeah, like good cops are fired or in the process of being fired.
Yeah. They get pushed out.
Or quitting.
Yeah, or quitting.
And so David Scott was the Saskatoon Police's media person from 1988 to October of 1991, encompassing the period of time that the Stonechild investigation was occurring. He would later become Saskatoon's chief of police in June 1996, and he left in June of 2001. A Star Phoenix article was going to hit March 4th, 1991 about the case. Allegations in the article suggested a poor investigation was done, no shit, and suggesting that racism was a contributing factor to the lack of investigation. Again, no shit. So at the time of the article, Scott denied this. In quotes, I don't agree. A tremendous amount of work went into this case. And then the newspaper article indicated that he pointed to a, quote, hefty file. It turns out the file that he referred to by the reporter may have been one of two files that he routinely carried with him. One contained the current Crime Stopper flyers that had been inside to investigators, and the other one was a file of occurrences of the next 24 hours. That's real fucking misleading when you're pointing to a hefty file and it literally has nothing to do with what you're fucking talking about.
That's something that Trump has done recently is put a bunch of blank papers in a file and say look at all the
work we've done.
Yeah.
So much work.
Binders of Women.
Yeah,
who was that one?
That was Mormon. What's his name?
Radio Demon. Who came up with the Binders of Women?
I forgot about Binders of Women. Give me
He's super more. Why am I drawing a blank on this man?
Binders full of women was a phrase used by Mitt Romney on October 16th, 2012.
I guess those magic underwear didn't protect him from bad press.
Just to add, it was in response to a question about pay equity, referring to ring binders with resumes of job applications.
There you go.
We took a concerted effort to go out and find women who had backgrounds that could be qualified to become members of our cabinet. I went to a number of women's groups and said, can you help us find folks? And they brought us whole binders full of women.
Just binders of women.
So anyway, the article goes on to say that the police pursued every avenue. So in February of 2000, David Scott, now chief of police, is quoted again in an article. At the inquiry, he indicated that more work could have been done. So I need someone to read this. You.
Question. Okay, now, Mr. Scott, is that the extent of the investigation conducted by the Saskatoon Police Service? Do you today believe it's correct to say that a tremendous amount of work went into that case? Answer. Well, it depends. This case, when I read it after receiving it from you, was completed on the assumption that the death was from hypothermia from the autopsy, and I believe that the pathologist who took part in it. I realized in reading through it that there could have been more work done on the investigation. Yes, end quote.
So this Buddy didn't even know that if he did not review the reports or if he had read some or all of the reports. So he just basically was like, I don't fucking know what I read. I don't know.
I don't know.
The inquiry found David Scott had misled the public in a 1991 interview, and had David Scott carefully reviewed the file, the matter may have been investigated further in the same year.
Yeah. Once again, chief of police.
Yeah, chief of police. So he basically shit the bed on that. That said, he ultimately started the process to have the RCMP investigate the death of Stonechild. Also, another similar issue about Daryl Knight had arisen, leading to the suspension of Hatchin and Munson.
Good evening. Harsh allegations against 2 Saskatoon police officers. They're accused of mistreating a native man. And at the same time, an investigation is being launched into the mysterious deaths of 2 other Aboriginal men. Pia Chattopadhyay reports.
Good morning.
A brave face from a police chief fearing the worst.
To a chronology of events here, and we have nothing that would indicate that they are related. The person being dropped off or the 2 people that were found.
This morning, the chief said what happened during the past few weeks would be at the center of 2 separate but internal police investigations. He was firm the police could and would investigate 2 of their own officers.
But the Saskatoon police are under pressure. Hours later, Chief Dave Scott reverses his decision and turns the investigation over to the RCMP.
But by the way, for our non-Canadian listeners, RCMP and city cops are kind of the same distinction as city cops and state cops.
Yeah,
it's like city. I think the RCMP are probably more akin to the FBI in the U.S.
Yeah, so the RCMP are a federal policing force, which the state doesn't really have. But it's closer, like you said, to a state's police who would do investigations over the whole state as opposed to a city's police that would just work on a single city.
RCMP have jurisdiction over all of Canada, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are specific chunks of Saskatchewan RCMP that are in charge of Saskatchewan.
Division F, I believe.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. He also wrote the Ministry of Justice asking for investigation into 2 other deaths. The RCMP actually created a task force called Project Ferric to look into this, eventually leading to discipline of the Deputy Police Chief Dan Wicks. So that's enough of David Scott, and here we are on to David Wilton.
David Wilton. At the time, he was the duty officer. So basically, he deals. Duty. Yes, I did say duty. So he deals with major incidents that arose on or staffing issues during the shift that he was assigned. He reports to the superintendent of operations. Now, he didn't recall Stonechild, but finding the freezing body should have been brought to his attention. He said he should have no issue calling in an investigator if they were off duty if one wasn't available. So in an interview with the RCMP, he indicated, quote, he can't even remember Stonechild coming in or going out of cells, what officers might have arrested him, end quote, but also recalled that, quote, a fair bit of news and talk about it, end quote, but that, quote, that's one case that I had little or next to nothing to do with, end quote.
Yeah, so he's separating himself from the case.
Yeah, it's not my business.
I don't know my problem.
It's not my problem.
Yeah, not my monkey, not my circus.
It's like that whole ACAB thing where it's like, well, I have an uncle who's a good guy and a good cop. And it's like, well, okay, if he's a good person, he's still being complicit in all the other shitty work.
System. Yeah.
this guy totally fucking complicit in it. Hey, I'm not involved, but I'm certainly not stopping it either. You know,
There's some chatter. I think I heard about it on the news, but I can't be sure.
And that's exactly what his testimony says. He went on to say he was asked about a feeling he had that Stonechild had been arrested. Quote, "It's the feeling I had. Back in 1990, I got the feeling a couple of officers brought him into the cells and then took him out," end quote. And during the time he spent in the detention center and communication center, quote, "I don't recall Stonechild either seeing him or hearing of him," end quote. He referred to the papers when he became aware of Stonechild. He said that he had a feeling that, quote, "in the back of my mind, he, Stonechild, was brought in and taken out because there was no charge or he wasn't drunk enough to hold," end quote.
Whoa.
That said, at the inquiry, he said all he knew of Stonechild was from what he had read in the media. So, despite his testimony that he would be advised in the event of a frozen body, he had no memory of it.
Yeah.
Shrug emoji.
Yeah. It was a definite shrug emoji.
So basically, the dude who was supposed to be supervising really wasn't supervising shit.
We're not Saskatoon isn't processing 50 murders a weekend or something.
No.
Like New York City. Finding the dead body of somebody and doing a partial
We don't get a lot of those.
Yeah. You would remember that shit.
It seems to me there were a whole lot of people that forgot a whole lot of shit that they shouldn't have forgotten. I've undergone 30 ECT treatments, and I remembered this shit better than some of these cops.
That's right.
Okay, so Frank Simpson, in charge of plainclothes investigations, Murray Montague, the deputy police chief, and Joe Pencallum, the chief of police, had no recollection of the Stonechild matter at the time.
Okay, sorry. Plainclothes investigations is a name that I've danced under.
Okay.
You start in just civilian clothes, no fancy outfits, just you know what? These are my mama jeans. I'm not gonna strip in them.
Plainclothes investigation. Sorry. Continue.
However, the chief did instruct subordinates to advise of anything major that had happened, day or night, duty or off duty.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing was mentioned. He recalled nothing.
Yep.
He indicated that if there were concerns about investigations brought up in the media, he would expect to be advised. Nope, nothing.
Nothing.
He was asked to review the Stonechild file and felt more investigation could have been done, and even went so far as to say there was negligence in the investigation. Now, Jim Madden, who was Saskatoon's mayor from 2000-2003 and then lost badly, fucking got his ass handed to him, finished a distant third behind Don Atchison.
Yeah.
It was a bad election. I know because I actually volunteered for Jim Madden. I knocked on doors for the guy, so he's on my team.
Sort of, I guess.
Sort of, I guess.
I mean, Jim is really on Jim's team.
Jim is on Jim's team.
But
he's now the mayor of Purdue?
I don't know.
He's the mayor of a small town in Saskatchewan. He still does the mayor thing.
I'm going to say it's Asquith.
Asquith, yes.
Asquith?
Asquith. Okay, so anyway, Jim Madden, who was Saskatoon's mayor from 2000 to 2003, during the inquiry, and an NDP candidate in the 2006 federal election, which is when I worked for him, he axed Dave Scott, who was the chief, and weren't clear as to why, but told the media that it wasn't due to the inquiry.
Of course not.
Not at all.
Nope.
Nothing.
Had nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do with it. So a cop from 1972 to 1997, retiring as superintendent, nothing to do with the investigation, did recall hearing of a frozen body found, heard about Hartwig and Sanger in connection with the story, not sure when he heard about it, but that it was prior to 1997 when he retired. Madden was interviewed by the CBC and stated that there were, quote, groups of people working within the police service that were successful in keeping information contained, end quote. When he testified for the inquiry, he indicated that he did not receive, or rather did not believe that there were, quote, contained information with respect to Neil Stonechild that had been withheld from superiors or the public.
Okay, that was like wishy-washy waffling?
Kind of. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
He testified that the rumors on the matter ought to have been known by the superiors and senior members of the police. That said, he said that there was a divide in information flow between lower ranks and higher ranks. Said during an interview with the RCMP, quote, I know that it was known that these guys were being looked at, referring to Hartwig and Sanger. When cross-examined, he said that he did not hear stories about Hartwig and Sanger being improper towards Stonechild.
Did he just say that?
Did he know or didn't he know?
Yeah.
Who knows if anyone knows what's going on.
Yeah.
They say there's a block in the upcurrent, but like we just went through like some statements from the chief of police, and he seemed to be playing ball with the boys pretty smoothly, you know?
Right.
He was holding that thin blue line up high.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and he turfed Dave Scott, but it had nothing to do with the inquiry. No, definitely not.
My personal opinion as Leon Filger is that the termination had everything to do with the inquiry.
Yeah.
His personal opinion, allegedly. Leon Filger's alleged personal
My
opinion.
alleged personal opinion.
Yes,
That's
allegedly.
When you talk to police officers, they don't admit to this blue wall. It exists. There's no question about it. I mean, I was part of that profession, and I know that it exists. And I think you see it time and time again when an officer that was there is interviewed with regard to what he saw. You know, they didn't see anything. They were busy doing this or busy doing that, and that's a bunch of crap. In a lot of cases, they know exactly what happened, but they just don't say.
And this is like, as a kid growing up with this inquiry, like this happened in 2000. I was in my early 20s. And I remember following this very carefully and thinking all of it was 100% bullshit. And now a decade later, coming into this podcast and doing this, I still feel that most of this testimony was bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It happens.
It happens.
It happens.
So the hearing felt Madden's testimony was important as he was able to recall the death of Stonechild. Many people involved in the investigation did not remember this.
Surprise.
He was also the only police witness to attribute the matter to Hartwig and Sanger before the RCMP investigation started.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, man, so he started pointing fingers at, like, people inside the police department, and then he got canned?
Yes.
Weird.
Yes.
That's not like a trend that happens over and over again in police departments, is it?
Madden wasn't canned. Madden retired as a superintendent.
But when he retired, and I mean, and this is me throwing this in, this is not from the script that Richard Bigley wrote for me. Madden was retired under
quotation marks.
Okay, like he was
suspicious air quotes retired.
There were suspicious air quotes retired.
Okay.
Like he get a great going away party,
encouraged to end his career.
Okay,
or
so
something
back to Constable Mackey. Not related to Stonechild, but rather Jason Roy. He testified to the inquiry that he responded to a robbery at a Humpy's restaurant. Jason Roy and Elton Dusty Horn were suspects. He said he would try to contact the suspects, but if not able to, he would place a warrant for their arrest. Now, there's no evidence that a warrant was in fact issued for the arrest of Jason Roy. Mackey acknowledged that from time to time, de temps en temps, he would arrest a person who was causing a disturbance and drop him off at a safe place several blocks away. He described this as, quote, unarresting the person.
Well, that's fine. Like drop him off at the Sev or whatever.
You know, I'm being a disturbance. The people I'm with don't want to see me. Cops get called. He puts me in the back of the car, drives me to a payphone, gives me a quarter. I don't know. I'm just giving him a quarter, but you know, and says, "Get out of the car. Call somebody to get your ass out of here.
Yeah.
Don't fuck with those people anymore.
Don't go back to the Humpties.
Don't go back there. No.
Yeah. So why is Mackey important? Well, it gives reason for Jason Roy to believe that he was wanted by police at the time of the Stonechild disappearance.
Ooh.
So anyway, the RCMP took charge of the Stonechild investigation in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So Police Chief Dave Scott advised Deputy Chief Wicks to basically give the RCMP any and all information and to cooperate with them fully in their investigation. Wicks had been told that the RCMP had placed wiretaps on the phones of Constables Hartwig and Sanger.
Ooh.
The RCMP were to establish whether or not there were reasonable grounds to believe that Constables Hartwig and Sanger had committed a criminal offense. August of 2002, Wicks was advised that the Justice Department had reviewed the file and were not recommending charges be laid. At meetings with the RCMP, Wicks was shown photographs and documents, but would not be given copies. He also testified to a number of changes that the Saskatoon police had made in policies and procedures since 1990, including the creation of a suspicious death review committee. Wicks told the inquiry that he felt the officers involved had done their jobs. However, on the matter of Jarvis, he felt that it wasn't Jarvis's fault that he wasn't called to the scene. He also noted that Jarvis should have been asked to be switched to a day shift instead of the night shift so that he could follow up on the investigation. Wicks did also testify that it was not clear how Jarvis came to the conclusion that Gary Pratt was not involved and that statements should have been taken from more people, including the people who found the body.
Yes.
Imagine finding a body and the cops don't ask you any questions about it.
That's fucking insane.
It's fucking insane.
We just missed that. We were going down the checklist. We just missed that line. We kept checking through. We thought it was done.
Also, in the May 2003 newspaper article titled, quote, "Officers Stayed on Job During Stonechild Probe," end quote, Wicks told the paper that police did not know that Constables Hartwig and Sanger were considered suspects. But at the inquiry, Wicks acknowledged that, at the time, he knew they were suspects. So why did he lie to the media? Why leave them on the job? There wasn't really any explanation.
No. Or was there?
The Saskatoon police created a, quote, issues team intended to deal with security issues around the inquiry, provide info that the inquiry needed, and attend to communications matters. The inquiry reviewed the minutes of the meetings held by the team and found that the issues team took on another role. As the inquiry unfolded, they started to seek out experts to comment on the injuries Stonechild had to his nose and wrist.
Mm-hmm.
The team contacted the FBI attaché in Ottawa, found a pathologist in Minneapolis, which they went to go visit, who indicated that Stonechild's injuries were consistent with a fall on ice or snow, definitely not a blow. The cuts on Stonechild were too clean and straight to be from something in nature, like twigs or what have you. The inquiry found that, quote, purpose was to obtain an opinion that the marks on Stonechild's nose and right wrist were not caused by handcuffs. The team were focused on discrediting medical reports. The inquiry found that the police service was acting as an advocate for its members instead of carrying out its job of law enforcement and ensuring that discipline of its members.
And be reminded of my forensic pseudoscience episode. Like, a lot of these comparisons of marks is just a human eye comparing marks made in the lab to marks on the body. Like, it isn't an exact science. And when they're going against medical experts with what may be like a pseudoscientific forensic technique, or even just an unreliable, inaccurate forensic pseudoscience technique, they're trying to discredit medical science with that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly it. They know what conclusion they want. They know how they want this person to testify. So you just go out there and find the person who's going to testify that for you as an expert. You know, unlike actual science where you do experiments and then you get your conclusions created. You just try to produce enough facts to back it up.
I just spilled beer all over my pants.
It was kind of fun. I tried to mop it up
What the
with...
fuck, man? Get it together.
Tried to mop it up with sheets of paper, and I'm dangerously close to his penis.
Chicken or go! Chicken or go!
Well, I'll always go, but...
He dressed to the left today.
We're not cutting this.
It got a little bit. It looked like you peed. But now that I know that your penis is on the left and not the right, it does not look like you peed.
Well, how do you explain the wetness on his left side, though?
We need a forensic pseudoscientist to tell us.
We'll get ourselves a forensic pseudoscientist.
Okay, shut the fuck up.
There's no wetness on the left side. It's only on the right.
Do I have to wash these pants now? Okay, so...
I hear all, I record all.
The inquiry found that the purpose was to obtain an opinion that the marks on Stonechild's nose and right wrist were not caused by handcuffs. The team were focused on discrediting medical reports. The inquiry found that the police service was acting as an advocate for its members instead of carrying out its job of law enforcement and ensuring the discipline of its members. Mm-hmm. The inquiry went so far as to state that the police department's position is indistinguishable from the police association, that is the union, who is tasked to defend its members, rant about police unions. So fucking police unions, fuck them.
Fuck.
They're not real unions.
They're fake bullshit unions designed to oppress workers and ensure that bad cops get to keep their fucking jobs.
Or just get moved to a different location.
One staff sergeant spoke to the inquiry about how the cops need to defend their own.
Should I could read
No,
that.
I want to read it.
You want to read it? Okay,
yes,
you read it, Ann.
Do you want to be the A? I'll be the Q and you be the A?
You are Q, and I am a real big A, so yeah.
Now, I guess the problem or the potential concern, though, is when and how do you come to the conclusion that one is unjustly accused?
Oh, no doubt about it. You're right.
And if you come to that conclusion too soon, you're rallying around and defending your own when perhaps you shouldn't be?
You're right.
You testified that you thought it was a positive thing when the RCMP were called in response to certain now well-known situations of bodies being discovered on the outskirts of town and the Daryl Knight situation.
Yes.
I suggest to you that part of the reason that's positive is to have an outside force brought in is the potential problem for you. And by you, I mean the force, the investigative arm of the force, to be objective in looking at their own people.
No doubt about it.
That is a concern?
Always.
That you could lose your objectivity?
Definitely.
So basically, this speaks to the issue of cops. Why did Luteet fear he would be reprimanded for bringing up concerns of an insufficient investigation? Why was Tarasoff told to stay out of the matter? Why would they say the issue was investigated when it obviously was not? Why would they lie to the media in 2003? Like, what the fuck transparency? And Leon's getting high.
Stonechild's frozen body was found on the outskirts of Saskatoon in November of 1990. He died of hypothermia and his death was labeled accidental. But an inquiry is set for this fall to examine how the police investigation was handled.
Much of that evidence is coming from this man, Jason Roy. He was a friend of Neil's and says he was with them the day he disappeared.
The next time I saw him, he was in the back of a police car.
According to the inquiry report, that was the last time Neil Stonechild was seen alive. It took until 2003 and an inquiry into his death for them to get answers and to share their story. The inquiry established through Jason Roy's testimony that Neil Stonechild was with 2 police officers the night he disappeared. The 2 officers named in the report, Constables Larry Hartwig and Bradley Singer, they have never been found criminally responsible for Stonechild's death.
On November 24th, 1990, did you have Neil Stonechild in the back of your car?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The evidence all indicates that.
The first I heard about stuff like this happening was prior to the inquiry or at the inquiry. Brett Mackey was a police officer who testified in the public inquiry that said police officers unarrest people all the time. You know, like I said before, what ass would do that, right? What person would take a guy from a drunk, obnoxious guy involved in a disturbance from one location, drive him to another location, drop him off? You only move the problem. You don't solve the problem. You only move the problem. I mean, my badge was the symbol of my commitment, right? If you interview the members of the Saskatoon Police Service, they'd tell you in a heartbeat that if, you know, Larry and Brad could come back as police officers, we'd welcome them with open arms. Of course, now the Saskatoon Police Service will demand these back. Yeah.
And then this is
Screw them.
Being able to lie is a trait that is necessary as a police officer. I know that's tough for people to listen to or people to hear, but you have to be able to, and it's not a matter of being a liar, you've got to be able to work your way around other people's lies. So how do you do that? You have to be a good liar yourself.
Last time we looked at how the city cops of Saskatoon dealt with Neil Stonechild, which is mostly, it's seemingly...
They didn't.
There was a lot of cover-ups. There was a lot of indifference. There was a lot of them doing things that wasn't the way they usually do them, such as like giving clothes to the family. Like there's a bunch of sneaky shit. Listen to the past 2 episodes if you want to find out just how little they seem to care about the death of this young man.
I can sum it up in yikes and sneaky shit.
Yeah. But today we're going to look into what the other class of cops in Canada, what they did about it. This is the RCMP, the federal police, equivalent sort of to the FBI, state cops. Basically, the RCMP coming in is a sign that bigger guns are being brought in. That would be nice if that happened. But yeah, they became involved at some point. So Officer McFadden, one of those. Officer doesn't really cover it. The RCMP is built much like a military corps, where there's certain ranks, and the ranks that go up, as they go up in authority, they're in charge of more people, they have more power, they have more sway within the organization. He was a 2IC for the F Division.
Second in command for the F Division. That's what 2IC means.
Yeah.
Second in command. He's not the guy in charge of F Division, which is the entire province of Saskatchewan, but rather the second in command of the province of Saskatchewan, which is still pretty high in the RCMP ranks.
Yeah, it's a pretty big fucking deal.
It's a fucking deal.
Yeah.
You know?
He was brought in by the Ministry of Justice to investigate what happened to Daryl Knight. He was also to investigate Rodney Nastis and Lawrence Wagner, 2 other freezing deaths in Saskatoon. This started Project Ferric. Project Ferric cost around $750,000, in addition to the usual salaries of the officers and RCMP staff involved. It was an expensive investigation. They took on the Stonechild case in February of 2000. The RCMP interviewed about 200 witnesses in relation to this case. They measured the marks on Stonechild's nose in post-mortem photographs taken of him, and to compare them to measurement of the Saskatoon police handcuffs in use at the time. This job is called a photogrammerist.
Cool.
I'm that.
And again, this is kind of something I touched on the forensic pseudoscience episode. So this is a person that I'm sure is practiced. Like, this is a job that they've done before. But they're still a human with human flaws and just using their human eyes to go over one picture and another and comparing marks.
As opposed to elf eyes.
Yeah.
Legolas, tell me what your elf eyes see.
Yeah, they do not get advantage on spot rolls.
No.
So the job is called a photogrammerist, and the guy the RCMP called in was named Gary Robertson. The RCMP had Stonechild's body exhumed, so dug back up, and a second autopsy was done by Dr. Graham Dowling. The RCMP were continuously in contact with the Saskatoon police, and they found the Saskatoon police to be professional and cooperative with the investigation. The RCMP say that. The RCMP provided their findings to the Department of Justice in June of 2002. In August of 2002, the department wrote back and was not recommending charges. They were not recommending any charges be placed upon the officers involved, or anybody else involved. In July 2003...
You say July?
July.
In July 2003, Deputy Chief Wicks contacted the RCMP about his objections to Gary Robertson's assessment. He wanted a new one done. Apparently that's just something you can do if you aren't happy with a report. You can just request, hey, you didn't do it right, I don't like the conclusion, redo it.
Well, you always can get a second opinion on pretty much anything.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I don't like this. Well, okay, second opinion, you get someone else in, and presumably they're,
right.
They'll side with you, and then whatever, you know.
In general, in general, I'm very in favor of second opinions. I just wish they were offered more often to citizens rather than just when cops are trying to get out of trouble. You know,
hot take.
You know, it seems like like I said, more tools, less scrutiny is offered to police when they get in quote unquote trouble than do citizens. Like, if second opinions were allowed in citizen cases more often, then I'd be more happy with it.
Well, I mean, I think second opinions are permitted. It's just the issue is that if you are a citizen, instead of having billion-dollar budgets out of taxpayer money, you get your whatever your income is, and you've got to pay for that in addition to your lawyer.
Yes, which is not feasible for lots of people. Yeah,
which is why I think a lot of citizens don't actually have second opinions, is just on that basis that can I afford the guy from Minneapolis to fly to Saskatoon to review this sample or review this case and provide an opinion that counters what the state has come up with. You know, it's one of those failures of the justice system, I think.
As a comfortably middle class family between me and Mr. Sage Murray, we couldn't afford that.
Yeah.
And that's not we're comfortably middle class, not
one of y'all would have to be in some serious fucking shit for you to want to expel that kind of cash to get off.
It would be a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, and looking at expert testimony, knowing how much these people are paid, getting an expert for $100 an hour for 40 hours a week for the months it may take for a court case, like for $100 an hour for an expert testimony is a fucking bargain. Like usually most of these guys charge $300, $400, $500, $800 an hour for their opinion.
Yeah.
And like class justice, all that good shit. So the RCMP wanted a new one done. They wanted a second opinion. So Frodo
at the Shire.
Photogrammetry is described as the science and engineering of taking measurements from imaging. For example, photos, but electronic records also count. So taking measurements of like waveforms of radar sheets, stuff like that. So Gary is super into this, Gary Robertson. He got a diploma in 1973. He was employed by the government of Canada from 1976 to 1980, doing close-range photogrammetry at historic buildings. He wrote articles on the topic. He taught police courses on the subject. He seemed to be practiced in this realm.
Mm-hmm.
Whether the realm of study is valid or not on a scientific basis, either or, he had a lot of experience doing this.
Right.
Commissioner Council tried to discredit him. They dug up past cases where he was challenged in his ability. They questioned his curriculum vitae. Well, what's curriculum vitae?
Like a resume.
It's like an extended resume.
Okay, as it appeared to bolster his qualifications to suggest more than what he had obtained in training.
Okay.
However, what mattered was his measurements taken. This is where it mattered. He was asked to provide measurements based on photos. He was not told in advance about the marks being suspected from the handcuffs. When he did his original measurements, he knew nothing of the handcuffs. After this, he was provided handcuffs and asked to measure them. He testified that the marks on Stonechild's nose would be consistent with forceful application of the handcuffs.
Can I pause you there? I just want to interject what that means.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the concept of brass knuckles, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, well, as a cop, you don't generally carry brass knuckles, but you do carry handcuffs. And if one were so inclined as a cop who has handcuffs, you could, use them as like brass knuckle substitutes. And so that is where the concern over the marks on Stonechild nose comes about, is that it was perhaps, suggested that Stonechild was, that the police had used their handcuffs as brass knuckles prior to abandoning Stonechild in the north end of the city.
Right.
Yeah. And that's something that cops are taught. There's a lot of erectile nerve-filled tissue in the nose, and it hurts when it gets bopped. And that's something that the police are taught in the academy. If you need to do pain compliance, if you need somebody to do something, you make them feel pain. And one of the ways you can make them feel pain is go for the bridge of the nose.
Yeah, fuck. I've had my son just sitting on my lap and put his head back, and it hurts like a motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
They teach us that in demon school, how to make people get tortured.
Yeah, it hurts when it's coming from like a baby.
Sounds like your cops will fit right in when they get down here.
So Gary prepared photos with the handcuffs superimposed over the marks. The inquiry accepted Gary's testimony as the likely cause of the marks. When Constable Jarvis, the original investigator, was shown photos in 2000 of the marks, he also said it was consistent with handcuff marks. Here is a listing of the medical evidence. From Dr. Brian Fern, I like that. A coroner appointed to the Stonechild investigation. That's Dr. Fern. He started his practice in 1961 and he moved to Saskatoon in 1970, and he's been here ever since.
Is he still alive?
Maybe.
I don't know. Probably.
His testimony indicated that a coroner would be called in if a death was suspected to not be entirely due to natural causes. He indicated that when he was called to the scene of Neil Stonechild, his primary role was to ID the body. Police were generally responsible for further investigation. So all he was given to do was to identify the body. He wasn't asked to do any type of homicide inspection of the body as a medical expert. He told the inquiry that when he was called out, the police told him that the deceased person was a young offender and that the officers knew the deceased's identity. However, when compared to his notes of the call, he noted that the police told him the person was about 30 years old.
Oh.
He was 17 at the time.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, he was a little baby.
Yeah.
And Dr. Fern is alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sort of holds parallels to some of what like black people go through in the States, where as soon as they start to look sort of like a man in their late teens, they're considered to be like, an adult offender. Like that's sort of treated by the police.
Whereas if it was a white guy, he would be a juvenile offender.
Yeah, he'd be just a kid. Yeah. He indicated the body was quite frozen and didn't notice any wounds or cuts on Stonechild's face. The frozen nature of the body may have contributed to Fern not seeing the marks on the face. He requested the body be moved to St. Paul's Hospital for an autopsy, where Dr. Jack Adolph would conduct it.
I was born at St. Paul's Hospital.
Really?
I was.
I think I was born at RUH.
I was born at City.
Well, nobody's perfect.
I was born in North Battleford.
My son was born at RUH.
I was born in the pits of hell. But Arthur was born in RUH.
Yeah.
Dr. Brian Fern received a phone call from Stonechild's uncle. Stonechild's uncle was asking about the cause of death, and he indicated that Neil Stonechild died from exposure to Stonechild's uncle. Fern's notes indicate that at some point he was informed Stonechild was a young offender who was unlawfully at large from his community home. His notes also log a call from St. Jarvis. Fucking balls.
Lay off the weed, buddy.
I think so. I think it's more the beer. I'm very lightweight when it comes to beer.
He's real good when it comes to weed.
Yeah. His notes also log a call from Sergeant Jarvis on December 6th. The note says, definitely seen alive, 9:30, Saturday, 24th of November. Had been to party. Drank about 26 ounces. Tried to get into an apartment shortly after midnight. Snowberry Downs. All confirmed by friends who were with him. Body was well frozen. Temperature was very cold. Probably died Sunday, the 25th of November.
You're getting cold now, aren't you?
I'm getting cold. Remember, it's blowing a gale, and the wind chill is about minus 27 degrees Celsius.
The body tries very hard to conserve the energy towards the core, to the important bits of you, the heart and the brain. Yeah. That's why you can't feel your fingers anymore. Yeah. This must be distinctly uncomfortable now.
Actually, no, I'm starting to get quite chilly now. My head is seriously cold now.
Yeah.
36.5 at the moment, Peter.
Here. 36.5. Okay. If it happens quickly like this, you're very aware of getting cold. If it happens more slowly, more insidiously, then you don't tend to have as much of an awareness, and you don't tend to feel all that uncomfortable. Sometimes you'll paradoxically just start undressing, taking your clothes off once you get really cold, and that, of course, just is part of a downward spiral that there's no way out of.
My way out of this is to get dressed and get out of this wind.
Yeah, you're starting to shiver. Yeah. I think it's time we maybe stopped this and got you warmed up now, eh?
Not a bad idea.
Yeah, okay.
But wind and snow aren't the most dangerous part of a blizzard. The biggest killer is the cold. A drop of just 4 degrees in core temperature and the human body becomes hypothermic. It's a condition that Dr. Colin Grissom is an expert at treating.
A person experiencing mild hypothermia typically feels cold and they start shivering. The shivering progresses to an uncontrollable shivering.
Shivering is the body's way of generating critical heat to keep you alive. But if body temperature continues to fall, hypothermia deepens. Then the shivering stops, and that's the beginning of the end.
When you stop shivering, the body is losing its ability to rewarm itself. So it is failing. Everything slows down. Metabolism slows down. So the heartbeat slows down, the breathing slows down, and all the cells slow down, including the brain.
Left unchecked, severe hypothermia like this will lead to death.
In the declaration of coroner, he indicated that the cause of death was as exposure. He wrote, natural, and crossed it out and wrote, accidental.
Ooh.
He noted police were still investigating the matter. Dr. Fern had also received a toxicology report in April 1991 on this matter. Unusual practice for the report was to be received by the coroner before police having a copy. It was very unusual for the police to receive the report before the coroner. This time the police received the report first and gave it to the coroner. There was no explanation as to why the police received the report first this time. Fern suggested that the police had some interest in this matter, and so the report was sent to them first.
Some interest.
Dun, dun, dun.
The coroner receiving the report was also delayed. There was no explanation for the delay either. The report indicated no drugs found, but Stonechild had a blood alcohol content of 150 milligrams in 100 millimeters, so about
what does that mean?
0.15.
Cat's alive.
So just about twice the legal limit.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's very easy to get there.
Like, I'm probably there right now.
Well, Philger and I, we got like a cheapo breathalyzer.
We did.
And he and I would often in our younger years conduct races to see who could max out the breathalyzer first.
No.
Do we still have access to that?
Yeah, I know where mine is.
Go get it.
Oh, it's not here. It's my parents' place.
I think that would be some good Patreon content. See, like
do me.
See who biologically, like by the numbers, can hold their booze better.
Yeah, because I probably feel the best, but I'm probably the most drunk.
We got moonshine. Just
but like we would sit down at the bar and like the bartender would laugh at us because we just ordered drink after drink after drink and then like breathalyze ourselves
I'm so ashamed.
to see who could get up to like point. I think the breathalyzer capped out at 0.16.
Capped out at 0.16. We'd see who could hit 0.04 first, and it was always you, and 0.08, and it was always you, and 0.16 was always me.
I am all that is man.
No, but I finally maxed out the breathalyzer more frequently than you did. I caught up.
Okay, well, I would
past you.
Like, I would literally really like to do this like all the time. You know, like, why are we not doing this right now?
This comes from a place that you guys doing this comes from a place of like curiosity and loving alcohol, and I can't disagree with either one of those.
No, just reckless ambition, I think.
Oh man,
no,
all about reckless ambition. I've danced under that name.
I mean, of course, the note on the breathalyzer is not to be used for criminal blah 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 blah. You know, because no breathalyzer company wants to get like fucking tagged unless you're like got the like $4,000 roadside test that the police actually do and calibrate like every week. I think those things go through a calibration just to make sure that they're still given proper results. But I digress. Stonechild had a blood alcohol content according to the toxicology report of 0.15.
Yes. And like, so we've seen so far that this Dr. Fern guy, like, he seems to be a little bit wishy-washy. He seems to be giving some mixed messages, and that's about to amplify. In a 1990 newspaper article, he was quoted as saying, "We have excluded obvious foul play as he did not have an injury of any kind. We've already learned that he has cuts on his nose."
But he did.
Yeah. He told the inquiry that Stonechild had injuries, but would not have contributed to his death. However, in a June 2003 CBC interview, he stated that Stonechild's injuries were consistent with being beaten and dragged. So
that's a large departure from what he originally said.
Yeah. He defended this inconsistency by saying that these words were suggested by the reporter. Also, the dude totally pulled a Bill Clinton. Depending on what you mean by the word is. Like, this is a statement. The statement was true depending on how one defines the term beaten.
Oh my God. How do you like, okay, beaten is like you have been beaten.
You have been beat?
Yeah.
Like,
and remember, one of the theories that the police were trying to put forward as like, this is a plausible explanation, so don't blame us, is he got in some interpersonal disagreement with some people and they beat his ass and dragged him out there. So this sounds like he's trying to play both sides a little bit.
Okay, well, first, no one would take a kid all the way out to the North Industrial area from the West Side.
Yeah.
Like, no one would do that.
Dictionary definition of beaten is having been beaten or struck.
Yeah, like pummeled with fists or like struck with something.
Like a handcuff.
Or beaten
with bodily, or like
or handcuffs to the nose as brass knuckles.
Yes, have had bodily harm inflicted upon you.
Okay, quick survey. Raise your hand if you've been in handcuffs, like police handcuffs.
Like by being arrested?
Sage,
Like
really?
actual arrest, like police have applied
Police have
handcuffs
applied
to you.
handcuffs and have said you're under arrest.
Just security guard training.
What did you do?
I ran from cops when I was in high school.
Bad boys.
Really?
What you gonna do?
That's intense.
What you gonna do when they come?
They never they never booked me or
Stay
like.
tuned for
Yeah, but
another
they put you
Richard
in
Bigley
They put me in
episode
handcuffs, yeah.
on the cops.
I was kind of a badass when I was also getting 100% in everything in high school.
Yeah, that's cool.
If you join that Patreon for just $1 a month, just maybe, you might even hear the story.
You might. I am the only one. Oh, me and Richard and I. We have an Ood story. We have a Leon story. I haven't done my story, and Richard hasn't done his story.
Nobody needs to know my fucking story, I tell you.
You have a very interesting story.
I have all sorts of stories.
Your story is tragic.
Oh.
So a bit more about Dr. Fern. He hadn't attended a formal coroner's meeting since he started work in 1967.
That was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like this is like 1990 when he's being like the coroner over Neil Stonechild. Yeah. But he hasn't like attended a coroner's meeting since like 1967.
That was a minute ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, they don't teach anything important at coroner's meetings, just stuff like
Nothing new
here's
ever-
how to better evaluate bodies. And like maybe
Nothing ever changes.
Like maybe he could have learned how to like survey a frozen body a little better if he attended one meeting after.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But, so the inquiry found that he had not executed his responsibility in the Stonechild matter appropriately. So he didn't go back for further training. He didn't attend a conference. He wasn't qualified to be executing his responsibility on Stonechild.
No.
He didn't take the responsibility to continue his education. He didn't question why a 17-year-old was found in the middle of nowhere, away from his home, intoxicated, away from any bars and restaurants, missing a shoe, with a worn-out sock from walking some distance without a shoe. He did not examine Stonechild's clothing. Again, Stonechild's clothing was destroyed before it could be properly examined.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't examine it for blood or other bodily fluids, like what may be present if he got like hit in the nose. Maybe he had... Nobody knows.
Oh no, Dr. Fern.
Yeah.
That was bad.
Dr. Jack Adolph performed the initial autopsy. From 1975 to 1997 when he retired, he worked at St. Paul's Hospital as a pathologist. That's a guy who studies bacteria and viruses, like how pathogens spread and grow, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Not at all. That's someone who studies dead people.
Okay, let's Google pathology.
I'm on it. Pathology is a branch of medical science that involves the study and diagnosis of disease through examination of surgically removed organs, tissues, bodily fluids, and in some case, the whole body.
Disease or injury, yeah.
There we go. So it's almost like a guy that diagnoses cause of death kind of stuff, eh?
Yes, that's exactly what
they are. Yes.
Fuck yeah. He also did not examine Stonechild's clothing, so the coroner didn't look at it. The autopsy guy didn't look at it, and the police didn't look at it. So nobody would there's so much stuff that wasn't done.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah.
Coincidence, eh?
Yep.
All these coincidences. Now, I'm not one to say there's a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Because that would not be me. But I'm thinking that there's a lot of coincidences here.
Yes.
Allegedly.
Just over and over again, the ball is dropped, and it seems to be an indigenous person every time. Weird.
Yeah, go figure.
Yeah. He told the inquiry. This is Dr. Adolph. He told the inquiry that he determined the cause of death to be exposure to cold. He reached this conclusion by ruling out other causes of death. Basically, you are found frozen in the snow, and there's nothing else to suggest a cause of death. Boom, died by exposure. He figured Stonechild would have died in 2 or 3 hours given the situation, like given the weather and the temperature and all that.
Yeah.
But there are factors that could have prolonged or shortened this. The autopsy report states that the time of death was 2200 hours, 10 p.m., November 27th, 1990. He was unable to explain how he arrived at this. He said a pathologist's time of death is often not reliable and that it was possible he had been dead since November 25th.
What?
You know,
Would you be like, I give this time of death, but fuck me, I'm not accurate. Don't even fucking listen to me.
Well, I mean, in his defense, though, I mean, you're looking at something that's a lot of unknowns after the fact.
Okay.
And you're being told to come up with an expert opinion based on the evidence face that and you're like, well, I can tell you at least this much, and you put that in. Like think of, say you washed your car.
Yes.
And you notice the big fucking gash on your bumper.
Yes.
And you don't remember hitting anything. You're the only one driving your car.
How did you get this information?
How did you, and you're looking at this gash now that you've washed your car.
Sorry, Mr.
And now
Sagemary.
someone's going to say, you file a claim with your insurance company. And they could say, well, when did this happen? Well, you don't know when the actual gash happened, but you knew last Saturday you were washing your car and then you noticed it. So you would say, well, I noticed it last Saturday. So whoever's taking your claim will put in last Saturday as the date of the loss, even though this could have happened days prior, months prior, weeks prior. Who knows?
Probably.
And so in his defense, I'm going to say that maybe, looking at the facts, he knows at least this much. And so he probably put down the most reliable information he had at the time.
You sound like a fucking union rep for the doctor.
As a gross, closer analogy, imagine taking a steak out of the freezer and someone saying, when did you put that in there? And you'll say, well, it's frozen solid, so it had to have been within, it couldn't have been 5 minutes ago, it had to have been at least, a day ago. But other than that, how do you tell if it was a month ago or yesterday?
And stuff that doesn't freeze solid that could be used to measure degradation, like fabric and like materials, will degrade in exposure over a couple days.
Right.
You'd be able to measure that, but those things were immediately destroyed. And by the time this guy got to it, like
I guess the best he could do is like an ish time.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
I'm sure this guy isn't like a chief fighter for indigenous rights, and all that, because he's part of that same system. But I'm saying that the initial investigation was not done correctly, so this guy really couldn't do his job correctly.
All right, I take back my initial derision.
Yeah.
To me, I think that he said that it's possible being November 25th. To me, it's he knew by 2200 hours, November 27th, 1990, he was dead.
Yeah.
But, when they say, well, it could be possible it was the 25th. Yeah, I mean, it very well could have been. He's, based on what you have, you got to make a decision.
Right.
And that's what he put down.
Yeah.
So
You got a frozen corpse that's been out for a few days.
Who knows?
Yeah. Okay.
Could have been yesterday. Could have been 2 days ago.
Could have been.
It could have been.
His autopsy report noted the marks on Stonechild's nose. So this is Dr. Adolph again, stating that they were abrasions. Abrasions only take off the surface layer of skin.
Road rash.
Yeah. And in comparison, a laceration cuts through multiple layers of skin. It cuts deeper.
Mm-hmm.
He testified that abrasions aren't unusual when someone dies by exposure. I learned this in first aid too. As the skin starts to lower in temperature and starts to stiffen up and freeze, it becomes way less pliable. So if you rub it against something, it can slough right off.
Causes more damage. Yeah.
But usually that's only the first layer of skin. So falls, stumbles, bumping against things could lead to abrasion. He indicated that the injury looked recent, but it would not be possible to determine an exact time frame of when the injury happened. He also stated that Jarvis's report that there were no signs of trauma to the body was incorrect. He said that he told Jarvis that there was no sign of traumatic death, which is a different matter. The doctor also noted in his autopsy report that there was a stone in the shoe worn by Stonechild, which was unexpected given where the body was found. He testified to the inquiry about Stonechild's blood alcohol level, indicating it may have contributed, but at a 0.15 was not linked to any sort of incapacity or coma. So it wouldn't have been the reason that he passed out unconscious, died. It wasn't blood alcohol poisoning.
Well, I mean, like I said, Philger and I, we would do it. We'd reach 0.16, which is twice the legal limit.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were still laughing it up and having a good time. It was just what you do, it's not enough to cause someone to be blackout drunk to be twice the limit.
No.
And I want to show everyone really quickly how blood alcohol concentrations affect your judgment. You may start off, have a drink, and you're starting to feel relaxed. Your intensification of mood. Then you're getting a little sedation. This is where you start to wonder, driving may not be such a smart idea. Maybe after 2 or 3 drinks, you're starting to get impaired motor skills. 0.08 in many places is an illegal level of blood alcohol concentration as far as DUIs. So things are beginning to be impaired. Not really dangerous yet. This is where things get kind of scary. Between 0.3 and 0.4, for most people who are naive to alcohol, you can start to lose consciousness. And then beyond 0.4, again, if you're alcohol naive, you can go unconscious. That's how you die.
So why does the blood alcohol level matter? Because there was a lot of suggestion that Stonechild had consumed a lot of alcohol that night and that he was intoxicated and that he drunkenly wandered out there on his own.
No, that's insane. How would you drunkenly wander all the way the fuck out there?
Yeah. And that was a lot
because he wanted to confess at the correctional.
Yeah,
He turned
right.
himself in at the correctional. That's
Yeah.
why he got drunk and walked all the way out to the correctional from those apartments.
That would take so long.
Well, look at the clip that we played, like in episode 1 of this series. Like, that's a very common attitude. Like, just another one of these natives, like, drinking. He probably got drunk and just wandered out there. And now they're trying to bring down these good old cops. And like,
Okay, but like, hey, let's bring up the map. Okay, where was it?
yeah, you do that.
I just want to know how long it would take to walk.
Looks like you got a whole bunch of the evidence packages that I've found too, eh? It's amazing.
Okay, well, it says an hour and 52 minutes.
To walk all the way out that way where he was. So if he were walking,
or 2 hours and 2 minutes, depending on which way you go. But it's a really
it's
fucking
2 hours to get there by foot.
Yeah, it's a really fucking long walk that I don't know.
Assuming he walked directly there.
Yes, and like I don't know if you've ever been drunk, but when I'm drunk, I do not want to walk for 2 hours.
Remember that time, Leon, when we got really, really fucking drunk at the Hose and Hydrant and then we walked all the way to your place in Lakeview?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, fuck.
That's a long way.
That was a long walk from Broadway to Lakeview.
Be reminded that the medical expert had said that that somebody in this condition probably wouldn't have lasted more than a couple hours in this condition. So he probably wouldn't have even made it there.
No. Mm-hmm.
So in comes another doctor, Dr. Graham Dowling. So this is different from Dr. Adolph and stuff like that. He does a second autopsy on Stonechild. He was certified in anatomical and forensic pathology. He was also a clinical professor at the University of Alberta. Due to the passage of time, he was limited in what he could do with the autopsy. The abrasions noted in the original autopsy were no longer visible due to post-mortem decay of the body. Remember, at this point, Neil had been in the ground for years, and he had to be exhumed for this to happen. There was a darkening of the skin and a loss of soft tissues. X-rays showed no evidence of cartilage or bone fracture. No injuries were found that were not already on the initial report, and they did not find any indication of disease. There was no evidence to refute the original autopsy report. The RCMP requested 5 answers to 5 questions about Neil Stonechild's death from Dr. Dowling. Number 1.
Are they more likely to be from, like the marks, are they more likely to be from being assaulted, or are they more likely to be from falling?
Stumbling around.
Yeah, from you fucking trip over your feet, you fall on the ground, you smack your face on some grass.
Or did he get like you said,
or did someone
a handcuff punch
handcuffs and fucking punch you in the face?
Did a cop punch him or did the earth?
Yeah.
Yes. The earth punching.
Number 2, are the wounds on the nose more consistent with a blow or an incised wound? Incised wounds are wounds that are usually longer than they are deep. So like longer cuts.
Yeah, you just kind of like scrape yourself. You know, you get like a paper cut where it's like longer on your finger than it is
going
deep
inside
into your skin, you know?
Number 3, are the marks on the face more consistent with a blow or a cutting force? So, like the difference between bludgeoning and slashing damage.
Yeah, so like a punch or like a slash.
Number 4, can you, Dr. Dowling, offer any suggestion as to the origin of the mark on Stonechild's right wrist shown in photo 42? So there was an abrasion on his wrist.
Let's see if we can pull it up. Are you able to find that?
Yeah. And number 5, is the blackening of the lips due to injury or to freezing?
Probably both.
Dowling's report indicated the wounds were caused by blunt trauma and not a sharp object. He indicated that he was unable to determine if it was from a fall or if it was from a blow, but in either case the injuries were minor. The snow around Stonechild was crusty and hard, So it could have come from a fall, but he would not rule out the injuries were due to an assault.
Okay.
At the inquiry, he was questioned on his report by the Council of Police Association as well as the Council for the Stonechild family. He maintained his position that he would not be able to determine, based on findings and based on photographs taken from where the injuries had been. So he wouldn't be able to conclude any findings based on the information he had.
Yeah.
He did, however, when questioned, venture that looking at a bigger picture, a man last seen in police custody with possible cuff marks on his wrists and possible cuff marks on his face, that would help him assign probabilities to what may have happened. Enter Dr. Emma Liu, a forensic pathologist in Miami, Florida, but was trained in Canada. The assistant clinical professor of pathology at the University of Miami. She was called at the request of the SASKATOON Police Service. Her experience with dead bodies was mostly in Miami, so not much.
Well, like hotter bodies.
Yeah, not much experience dealing with frozen bodies. In Miami,
like Stonechild.
You know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, not too many frozen bodies in Miami, but she was because of her experience, she was brought forward to give an opinion on the case. She looked at the photos of Stonechild's injuries for a few minutes and drew her conclusions.
I just want to note that this was the doctor called in by the police service to testify. So, like, you know, earlier we were talking about how the fucking police service and the police association / union were more or less there to try to defend their people.
Yes.
And so Emma Liu was basically there at the request of the police service to defend
their people.
Their people.
Yeah.
And so what this person's saying is, you know, they're not necessarily the neutral party. They're another party called in by, you know, the police service.
Let's just say that when the police hire experts, they're often not looking for objectivity.
We've all seen the staircase.
Yeah. They're looking for somebody who's going to help defend the officer, because that's the number one. That's the number one priority in a lot of books.
Well, that's that whole forensic science thing where it's like, well, you've got your conclusion, and now you've got to try to like make the facts line up to your conclusion, and that's basically what she does.
Yeah, and because of how the legal system works, like, subject matter experts are some of the only people who can offer facts in a courtroom. So their opinions can become facts, and that's very dangerous when you have forensic science that may or may not be reliable, and, you know, flawed people, all that good stuff. So her opinion, so she looked at Stonechild's injuries for a few minutes and drew her conclusions. The police were also kind enough to have the photos enhanced to see if she could provide a better opinion of the marks.
Enhanced is in like those suspicious air quotes, just saying.
Good old suspicious air quotes.
Her opinion was that the photos from the scene were better to evaluate the injuries versus the autopsy photos, as the cold slowed the post-mortem process. She stated that a handcuff could have caused the injuries if you scraped it hard across the skin. It wouldn't break the cartilage or bone. The answer that she came up with was that it was caused by stems and grass on the ground. As Stonechild's face fell down on the ground, she dismissed the handcuff hypothesis, as she felt there would be a bruise from the handcuff strike. The talk to the vegetation causing injuries to Stonechild was discussed at length. She seemed to dismiss the marks on Stonechild being parallel of having any real meaning. Talks of stems, twigs, when the area didn't really have any trees. She dismissed the marks on Stonechild's wrist as being from clothing, not handcuffs.
No.
Yeah. Photos shown at the inquiry show Stonechild's body with his hands tucked inside of his sleeves. Like, you know, you would do if you were cold and didn't have any gloves. I'm sure.
Yeah, like I do all the time. Or like my 6-year-old son does also.
Yeah, you pull your sleeves over your hands to get them out of the cold, out of the wind.
Yep.
So how does that make any sense? The cuff of his clothing was not in contact with his wrist, and his hands were in the sleeve. If your clothing is loose enough to pull your hands into the sleeve, it's not going to be tight enough to cause injury on your wrist.
Yeah, like when you fall on it.
She said it could have been found from the shirt he was wearing. It was suggested Stonechild was wearing a T-shirt at the time of loss. She did say, upon cross-examination, that a handcuff could have caused the mark if Stonechild was resisting, which makes sense when you consider that he was about to be thrown out into the cold in the middle of nowhere by the Saskatoon police.
Yes.
She then stated that the wrist marks could have happened after death, however, then agreed with Dr. Dowling that it's difficult to place an age on these sorts of wounds.
It took a while, but I found the picture. Also, there's another picture to show you afterwards. This is Neil Stonechild's hands post-mortem.
Well, you can definitely see, like
you see the indentation of the handcuffs.
Yeah, you can see a mark.
Wrist. Those are exactly the same indentations that existed for literally hours after I was released by the police.
Yes. Yeah.
I literally got released from the police. Then I went to the bar to meet Philger's mom and dad, and we talked all about the marks on my wrists from the police handcuffs.
Yeah.
So those look exactly like that. Those are police handcuffs on his wrists.
I anecdotally, that's what my marks look like too.
Anecdotally, that's what my handcuff marks look like.
And indentations like that are only filled back in through capillary action. You know what needs capillary action?
Heat.
A heartbeat. A heartbeat.
Yeah.
So that's why those marks are so prominent. And but you can see the very clear marks of a handcuff around his wrist. The fact that she thinks it was made by a tight sleeve.
No.
When he was
bullshit.
Yeah, when it was cold and he was probably tucking his whole hand into his sleeve.
Now, the next photo I'll show you is actually a little bit... It is a photo of a face of a dead person. So here is Neil Stonechild's face at post-mortem.
Yeah, and you see across his nose, two cuts on his nose. They are parallel, very fucking parallel.
Yes.
And now, I don't know, if you've ever sat down in a field on grass, on twigs, on leaves, and you sit down for a while and then you stand up, and you know how you got the imprints of the grass on your skin?
Your hands, yeah, wherever you've been laying on there, yeah.
Yeah. None of that shit's parallel.
No, because it's nature.
You've crushed grass and it's imprinted itself on your skin. These marks are parallel, and
they're from where the handcuffs do the swoopity thing inside the two prongers.
And using them as brass knuckles to punch his face in, I guess.
I would consider those gashes.
Gashes?
If I had one of those on me, I would say I had a gash.
Yeah, well, they're definitely...
Data point of 1.
They're also far too...
parallel and made by something like that?
Yeah, straight and parallel to be from something in
nature.
In
nature. That was very much the argument, that was being proposed. And this Emma, Dr. Emma, was saying, well, no, that's from nature and twigs, even though there's no trees in the area.
No.
I'm putting a smiling face back up because I can't
twigs
watch
just
that.
show up. They just sprout out of nowhere.
And they spring up very, very uniformly.
Very parallel,
Yeah, it's not like those. It's not like those ditches are manicured by the city and the companies, and there wouldn't be little trees growing inside. There wasn't any found at the scene. So we're getting to about that time where we're going to be closing out this episode. So bottom line, we talked about the RCMP coming in. We talked about them hiring some experts, some pathologists, some doctors to review. But a lot of times, by the time they got access to the evidence, Neil had been dead for years, and a lot of the original evidence had been tossed away. The inquiry found her testimony to be unconvincing. This is going back to Dr. Emma. Injury caused by twigs and grass, which happen to be exactly parallel, would be very unlikely. If you sit in the grass for a long time and stand up, there's marks on your skin from the grass, but not a lot of parallel marks. It's not consistent. And they wouldn't be parallel injuries along the nose.
No. That's a very specific location to have such harsh parallel lines. Even if you were lying face down on the grass, you wouldn't get marks like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the end of my section of the RCMP pulling in their experts. Not a lot of conclusions were drawn because a lot of the evidence had been degraded, and a lot of kind of play ball with the police opinion seemed to have been floated.
Forensic pseudoscience and that whole thing,
This is part 3. We've gone through a lot of stuff, but we're going to bring it together in part 4, the conclusion to the Neil Stonechild freezing death. So, this is the Occultae Veritatis podcast. I'm Ood Gallifrey, standing in a field in northern Saskatoon with...
Leon Pilger.
Dave Murray.
Yeah.
Richard Bigley.
With us.
Geo.
And, of course, the Radio Demon.
I'm going to talk into Leon's mic.
As you probably already know, because we probably already got a couple episodes of it out already, we did a long episode about Neil Stonechild, and a long, warranted episode. And we thought that it wouldn't really be complete unless we visited the spot where the police left him. We really want to absorb the gravity of what happened here, absorb the consequences of government agents doing terrible things to Indigenous people, and this is just one of the results of their action. So we're here. We're on 57th Street in Saskatoon.
So you can imagine back when Neil Stonechild was left here to freeze, none of these buildings existed.
Yeah, none of these buildings existed.
This was the middle of fucking nowhere.
There's aerial photos available that compared what it looked like then to what it looks like now.
Right.
And I mean, again, even today, there's absolutely no reason why, despite what the officers at the time may have suggested, there's absolutely no reason why he would even be here.
Yeah. No. And, like, for those of you that don't live in Saskatoon, I think we mentioned this in the episode, but I just want to reiterate now, there are no restaurants. Even in today's, there are no coffee shops nearby. There's no residential areas. This is all industrial zone.
Yep.
If you leave someone here in the middle of winter, you're doing it to harm them.
Yeah.
I believe our Radio Demon has the GPS coordinates.
There's also a cop plane that's been circling us.
Yes. Yeah, our wonderful city of Saskatoon, and its police service has decided to dedicate a bunch of its funds towards having a police plane flying overhead with a camera pointed below, and it appears that camera's pointed at us tonight.
It's called the Eagle Unit, Enhanced Air Guided Law Enforcement.
Yeah, so we're walking down a field just in between a couple of warehouses. You know, during the work week, these would be populated, but they're very empty now. And back when Neil Stonechild was left here, even these buildings weren't around. It was literally just a field.
So it's basically just chain link fence and barbed wire in front of us.
Yeah.
It's a sad place to die.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was right here.
Yeah.
There's just like power lines, chain link fence with razor wire on it.
Industrial stuff.
Yeah.
You know, agriculture implements and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's literally no reason to ever drop anyone here for any reason.
Yeah.
I just, you know, in a free and fair society, nobody should have to be brutalized or die alone or be put through torture just because they were born a certain culture or a certain race. But that's exactly what happened to Neil.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is the end result of a very brutal and unfair system.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It doesn't seem very motivated to change.
It's very cold.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not even like I'm wearing a sweater, a couple t-shirts, and do you remember what Neil had on that night? It wasn't much.
It was like a t-shirt and a jacket. They found him missing a shoe. They are very interested in us.
They are. If we stay here long enough, police will show up.
Well, they're probably on their way, and they're probably going to track our cars when we head out. So
Ready?
wouldn't surprise me.
Yep. What are you doing in this field? Naloxone training.
We're certified. I've got my kit in my purse.
You know, we get to return to our vehicles after being just briefly chilly, and you know, I can't help but be struck by the contrast how he died cold, alone, and in pain because of the decisions of the Saskatoon Police Department.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's very sobering. Yeah.
And like, I was even thinking, like, we were talking about maybe the police might pull up here, but we'd probably turn out okay.
Well, we're all white. We'd be fine to be like, oh, hey, sorry.
Hey, would you like to talk about this on our podcast? You know, would be like the response.
Yeah.
You know, and of course by that point they'd probably say, get off the property or whatever. But we'd probably turn out okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So on location for Occultae Veritatis, I'm Mood Gallifrey.
Zaid Murray.
Leon Filger.
Geo.
Richard Bigley.
And the soundboard demon.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that things have changed within the service and within the community. You know, we've enacted every single recommendation from the Stonechild Inquiry and from the Commission on First Nations, Métis, and Métis in the justice system. We've taken them very seriously. We've learned from some of our mistakes, and I think the community has as well. We have global positioning in all our police cars. So, for instance, and it's archived, we can go back to August 15th, 2009. I can tell you where car 213 was. I can tell you how fast that officer drove the car, every inch of the way that he drove that day or she drove, where the car stopped, where it started, completely archived. So if anybody does make an allegation, we can check on it right away. We also have forward-facing video and audio in our marked cars and our traffic cars. So if we pull somebody over, we have a full documentation of the whole event as it unfolded. And also we archive that. As a really good safeguard, I think, we also have rear-facing cameras in our patrol cars. So if we're going to place a prisoner in the back of our car, as soon as one of the officers opens the back door, the rear-facing camera is automatically put into place.
15 years after the release of the Stonechild Inquiry report, the Federation of Indigenous Sovereign Nations acknowledges that, yes, the relationship between Indigenous people and the Saskatoon Police Service has improved, but more needs to be done. Neil Stonechild was found frozen to death on the outskirts of Saskatoon, November 25, 1990, shortly after he was last seen taken into police custody. Chief Bobby Cameron of the FSIN says he looks forward to working with the Saskatoon Police Service and the province to keep improving the relationship and dialogue.
We're here to say that we continue to strive for that communication piece that we at the FSIN have advocated for in terms of Saskatoon Police Service, the RCMP of Saskatchewan. It's a critical component to have that constant communication about First Nation input.
Saskatoon Police Service held a community engagement session recently, and Chief Cameron says it's a good start and key component to getting input from First Nations. But former chief of the FSIN, Lawrence Joseph, who was in office when Neil Stonechild died, says the police need to be policed.
Saskatchewan is the only province, apparently, that does not have a civilian or impartial oversight, and we'd like to have that. There's no reason why we cannot have that, because there's still some filth and crud out there from certain members of police agencies. Under treaty, we're promised that the red coats will protect us.
Vice Chief Dutch Leroy says, yes, they have come a long way, but there's a long way to go.
I think it's more important to have a civilian oversight, and how that's arrived at, because as the chief said, it's the perception of the blue veil of police covering for police. And, you know, that perception is not only within the Indian country, but when in outside of Indian country as well. Case in point, we've had 2 deaths, one in North Battleford, another one out by Wadena.
Definitely, yes. I'm happy that I was a part of this process that helped a lot of people and opened up a lot of eyes to a situation that was out there. I feel that there's been a lot of changes. For the most part, they've been good. You know, like Chief Clive Wayhill done a really good job coming into a job where he didn't really. He came into a battle zone really when he got elected as chief. So he did a pretty good job at that, and I think that there's still issues when it comes to Aboriginal people and policing. There's still going to be issues, and there probably will be for a long time, but I think it was a great start in the process. I've dealt with it in a lot of different ways, and it was traumatic for me going through the experience of Neil dying, and the moment he died was a life-changing thing for myself personally. And then I think also when the inquiry started, went through its process and ended, the city of Saskatoon had a lot of big changes in it because of it, I think. I just hope it will kind of shed some light on some other big issues, and mainly one that I find very important is murdered and missing women in Canada. And I hope that this exposure kind of gives some enlightenment on that as well.
So the conclusion drawn from the inquiry was that the only people who knew for sure what exactly happened would be Neil Stonechild and Hartwig and Singer. There was like 8,000 pages, I guess 8,500 pages of evidence and transcripts. They put it all together, and basically they recreated kind of the events of what happened. So how it played out was that Stonechild met up with Jason Roy. They were taking the bus, and while on the bus, they met with an old girlfriend of Neil Stonechild's. They learned that she was babysitting for her sister and her boyfriend, who was Trent Ewert. They went to Stonechild's place, where Neil promised his mother to return to the group home after the weekend, and he even actually phoned the manager of the community home and promised to return. So, he's like, I'm leaving, but here's where I'm going to be. I'll come back at this point.
Seems pretty responsible.
It's a responsible thing that you would do if you, resided in a group home, so that people...
Which I have worked in several.
Yeah, where people would be concerned if you weren't back.
Right.
So anyway, Jason and Stonechild went out, grabbed some booze, and, Stonechild had a white T-shirt on and a lumberjack jacket. So the T-shirt, of course, as we discussed last episode, they had said, well, if it wasn't from his jacket, it was probably from the shirt he was wearing. And it's like, well, he's wearing a T-shirt, so a T-shirt isn't going to leave a cuff mark on your wrist. No. So anyway, Jason and Stonechild, they drank a bottle of vodka, likely a 40 ounce at a friend's place. Stonechild wanted to go to Snowberry Downs, so they went. They stopped at the 7-Eleven across the street first on 33rd and Confederation Drive in Saskatoon.
Is that still a 7-Eleven, or is it a Circle
No, it's
K?
a 7-Eleven.
It's still
now.
7. Okay, cool.
It's still a 7. It's been a 7 forever. Then they crossed the street and went to Snowberry Downs, which is a collection of apartments. So they went looking, basically going from apartment to apartment, looking for Stonechild's old girlfriend. Jason kind of got fed up with this, because you got a buddy who's like looking for an old girlfriend and just kind of harassing a bunch of strangers, trying to find her, going, building to building, buzzing all the different things, trying to find her, so Jason was like, no, I'm done with this, so I'm just gonna leave.
Bye, bro.
Yeah, bye, bro. And so Stonechild then became angry. Jason left and went to the 7-Eleven to warm up because it was, what did I say?
Minus 28. Yeah. Which is probably like minus 33 with the wind chill.
With wind chill, it gets fucking cold here. Stonechild, managed to get into an apartment and basically went door to door looking for his old girlfriend, eventually running into Trent Ewert. And, Trent Ewert wasn't having none of this, so Stonechild was kind of causing a bit of a disturbance, and he threatened to call the police. So Trent eventually did, and then Stonechild apologized and was like, I'm sorry, man. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if that's what he said, because nobody knows what he said. But he basically just, was like, oh, I'm sorry I went this far, and he left. So Stonechild would never be seen again by anyone in that apartment.
Mm-hmm. Well, just a quick pause. I want the last bite of that cookie.
I want the second last bite of that cookie.
I have. Oh, my God. Sorry, I'm so excited.
No problem.
Continue.
So what we do know is that a police cruiser with Hartwig and Sanger was dispatched to Snowberry Downs. They indicated they were en route at 11:51 p.m. The next hour, the inquiry found, based on evidence, that the officers came upon Stonechild shortly after 11:51. Stonechild was drunk. He was likely uncooperative. They took him into custody. Shortly after, they drove down Confederation Drive, finding Jason Roy, who denied knowing Stonechild. Now, Stonechild was calling to Jason for help in the back of the police cruiser. Roy gave the officers a fake name and a fake birth date. The name and the date matched up with his cousin, actually, Tracy Lee Horse. So Jason Roy gave his cousin's information to the police because, he figured he had a warrant for his arrest, as we had heard earlier in previous episodes. So at 11:56 p.m., Roy was released by the police, and at 12:17 a.m., the officers logged a call as gone on arrival. Basically, what that means is Stonechild was gone by the time the police arrived.
Gone like dead?
No, like as in, hey, there's a guy outside. He's being annoying. Please come deal with him. And so the police get there, but by the time the police attend,
then he's allegedly gone.
He's already gone.
Right, okay.
And that's the end of that. So Stonechild was recorded as gone on arrival. And so basically the status and name searches by the officers were very suspicious. For example, the call to Oregon Crescent, a block away, that took like 6 minutes to arrive at, and then was cleared again, and then again as gone on arrival. So whoever was breaking in at Oregon Crescent was gone by the time the police arrived. Then at 12:30, they searched Ewert's name, long after saying that they've handled the Stonechild complaint.
Yeah. So according to them, it was a nothing burger. They went to a call, and by the time they got there, they say that Stonechild wasn't even there. They didn't even make contact.
Exactly.
Troublemaker was already gone.
Yeah. So between running Tracy Lee Horse's name and clearing Ewert's complaint, 21 minutes had passed. There was 6 minutes to get to the Oregon complaint. So like 27 minutes, I guess, was unaccounted for. And then between Snowberry Downs, the dispatch, and the Oregon dispatch, then there was enough time in that unaccounted for minutes to drive Stonechild off drive to where they dropped Stonechild off. However, there was, not enough evidence to pursue that matter further, according to the inquiry. The inquiry had found that there was sufficient evidence that Stonechild had died in the early morning hours of November 25th, 1990, as a result of cold exposure. Nobody had heard from Stonechild since the event with the police. So, the inquiry found testimony from Jason Roy. There were some contradictions, but it was like corroborated with other evidence otherwise. They explained the contradictions were a result of the lifestyle that Roy was living at the time. Core to his testimony was that he was stopped by police, and what he saw was Stonechild in the back of the police car, and they felt that that was credible.
Sure.
Yeah. Hartwig and Singer maintained that they had no memory of stopping Joyce and Roy. They insisted that they would not have had time to arrive at Snowberry Downs, meet with Ewert, arrest Stonechild and put him in the car, and then have an encounter with Jason Roy at the time indicated after they had apprehended Stonechild. Of course, the evidence suggests that Stonechild had left the apartments after the police were called already, so this defense does not really actually stand up to scrutiny because he had already left the apartments.
Yes.
So,
allegedly.
Yeah. So the officers didn't remember nor make any notes with regards to any contact with Ewert that night, despite having been the guy who phoned in the initial complaint.
Right.
Evidence shows that A, Neil Stonechild was last seen in their custody at approximately 11:56 p.m. November 24th, 1990. B, that he died of cold exposure in a remote industrial area in the early hours of November 25th, 1990. And C, that there were injuries and marks on his body that were consistent with handcuffs.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to the discovery of Stonechild's body, it was found that the officers who attended the scene did their jobs. However, an investigator did not attend the scene, and the morality unit was put on the file and not major crimes. So this oversight was, I guess, essentially going to be very minimal compared to the inadequate investigation that would have followed.
Yeah. And you can see the level, like, as we went through before, you can see the level of attention given for, like, just victims of accidental death versus victims of like a homicidal crime. Like, his clothes weren't even inspected. They were thrown away because he was considered a quote-unquote an accidental death.
Yeah.
Which, like, went against police procedure to actually just give the clothes back to the family.
Yeah, they were just straight up destroyed.
So a quick and superficial investigation was conducted by Jarvis, with the file being closed merely days after being opened. 6 people were interviewed, mostly by telephone, 2 written statements obtained. Jarvis did not attend the scene of the death. He did not look at photos. He didn't examine the body or look at autopsy photos. He didn't read the autopsy report or the toxicology report. Why would you even have photos taken if you're not even going to look at them?
No, he literally just tootled around.
Well, exactly. And that's always my thing, is it's like, why would you do something if you're not even going to use that information?
Right.
Or use,
if you're just going to fuck around, around the edges of the information.
Why put somebody through the effort of having to actually, do their job when you're not even going to take the results seriously and use them in your investigation?
Yeah, you're an investigator, not an assuminator. Like investigate.
Yeah. So it's like, why even do these reports if you aren't even going to look at them? Like, that just seems,
sketch. It's mad sus.
Jarvis had received a tip that rival Gary Pratt may have been involved in Stonechild's death, but there was minimal follow-up. There was poor records of correspondence, no records of contact he claimed to have had with Sanger and Hartwig. He was completely disinterested in the investigation, and protocols were not followed.
Mm-hmm.
These deficiencies were apparently okay with Jarvis's supervisor, as the file was approved for closure. Internal complaints about the investigation after the file was closed would have allowed the police another chance to investigate, but no, the complaints were disregarded internally, namely because complaining officers were referred to the officer who they were lodging the complaint against. It's like, I think Jarvis needs to do a better investigation. Oh, well, go see Jarvis and let him know of your concerns.
Yeah. Even though he's your superior and has a direct impact on your career.
Yeah, precisely. That's
a really good plan. Hey, Jarvis,
what a great mechanism.
I'm aware that you're my supervisor, but I think you're kind of doing a shit job.
Yeah. It's essentially saying, hey, little chicken, put your head on the chopping block.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how the Saskatoon police does things. Or at least did things. I don't know if that's changed. Maybe. Public complaints about the investigation via media offered another chance to look at the at the case. Did the police do this upon media? These complaints being brought forward to the media? No. Despite an article suggesting that racism played a role in this lack of investigation. So it's like, you're the cops, you do the shitty investigation, and boom, you're in the newspaper, and they're saying, well, it's because you're racist, and they still did not feel compelled to do anything better.
Even if they gave 5% of a shit, they might do a crappy reinvestigation just to gain public favor, but they didn't even care enough to do that.
No, they didn't even give half a shit.
No.
Yeah, no.
So, the only time Stonechild was revisited was in 2000 when the RCMP opened a case and launched Project Ferric. The media started reporting on the conduct of the Saskatoon police. Minutes of Saskatoon police meetings showed vile feelings towards the media. For example, stating, and now this is in police minutes, your official formal documentation of the meetings you have held.
And they know that they're being recorded, so this is them on their best behavior.
Yeah, this is their best behavior. And anyway, I quote for the minutes, "It's their job to cause alarm, and a lot of what is stated, the general public are able to see through this. The media's job is to sell newspapers."
What?
That is literally what was in the minutes of the Saskatoon police on this matter when it was like brought up about, now the media is reporting on Neil Stonechild in the year 2000.
They were like, well, oh shit.
Well, the media just wants to cause alarm and sell newspapers.
Yeah, it's a total non sequitur. It's just like, newspapers, they survive on money. Okay, but respond to the criticisms, maybe?
Yeah.
Well, and it gets even more fucky because like when you add this kind of attitude that they're willing to put down on fucking paper in their meeting minutes.
Mm-hmm. What are they saying in the locker room?
Well, exactly. These, and you couple that with the misleading statements that were made to the media on the investigation. One person's like, "Oh yeah, an extensive investigation," and he points to a file folder with a bunch of unrelated material,
completely unrelated,
but
material.
Leading the reporter to think that this file is the investigation. Like one can only imagine how the Saskatoon police felt about the media.
Yeah.
But
that's fucked up, man.
Yeah, it's really kind of fucky.
I covered the Stonechild inquiry start to finish, and my prevailing memory from that event is how ashamed I was of the city and of the police department. But there were moments during that inquiry where I was proud as well. I was proud of the Star Phoenix, for example, of the work that we did in covering that story. Not long after Neil Stonechild went missing, Terry Craig, my former colleague, went and interviewed Stella Bignell. She was unhappy with the state of the investigation. The police brushed her off. No justice authorities wanted to hear from her, but Terry Craig of the Star Phoenix went and met with her and talked to her about how concerned she was over the sloppy investigation done into the death of her son. And that story became an important piece of evidence later on in the inquiry. And so there was some good work done in that too by a lot of people.
Given the power of the state that police are entrusted with, you think they should be like open to scrutiny and be like transparent to people. The inquiry exposed a lot of problems with the Saskatoon police. The police association union is basically not immune to these issues either. Basically, the association and the Saskatoon police went buddy-buddy on this to try to cover their fucking asses.
Yep.
In the 90s, the police had abolished several specialized investigation areas. So, like, you can't take a cop from one area of specialization, say, like traffic investigation, and expect them to be a major crimes investigator.
No, those are completely different things.
Oh, exactly.
And completely different skill sets.
But that's what they did in the 90s was they were like, well, you're a traffic investigator, but we're going to put you on major crimes. So now a guy who's used to, like, accident reconstruction, measuring, tread marks and skid marks and analyzing that kind of data is now expected to deal with murders, and like they're completely different investigations.
They're not the same thing.
You just leave so much room open for bullshit politics and nepotism, and like don't forget the piddly little they learn at the academy is just like the basics. When they get assigned different jobs on the beat, there's a lot of mentorship and on-the-job training, which depends on like higher ups, which we've determined may or may not be corrupt fuckers,
Since then, the Saskatoon had actually returned back to the idea of a specialized units for special, people who are specifically trained to know
about specific
about
things.
Shit that they need to know.
Right.
Imagine that.
So you won't have like the traffic guy trying to solve a murder.
Or like the brand new cop trying to solve a giant pedophile ring.
Yeah, exactly. So they've since returned to the specialization thing.
Yeah.
Officers would do 12-hour shifts, basically 4 days on and 4 days off. This means that a file would sit dormant for 4 days while the officer handling the file was off. Supervisors would not like reassign the files. They would just,
just let them hang out.
Just let them hang out for
Yeah.
4 days until the actual officer gets in. So I mean, at that point, as time progresses, the likelihood of evidence, is reduced. People's recollection diminishes. So
a lot of shit happens in 4 days.
Yeah, so in 4 days, they just let the file hang out until the guy came back and
memories
follow
fade,
up.
evidence degrades.
Yep. So they had also exposed in this inquiry a number of training issues, with the police officers of Saskatoon. The chain of command basically broke down. Top officers were not being informed of, the Stonechild's body, which we had discussed in previous episodes.
Yeah.
Top officers were very unaware of what was being reported to the media, and which is weird because it's on the fucking paper. Like, you think one of these top officers would pick up a paper and
be like, oh shit,
that's our guys.
Yeah.
No, it didn't happen.
Well, like back in the day, everyone got the paper.
And I believe it was Jim Madden who had said that there was a big disconnect between the lower officer ranks and the higher officer ranks, and and basically that disconnect was quite apparent there when top officers didn't know anything about Stonechild, or allegedly didn't know anything about Stonechild.
Okay.
Probably most importantly, it exposed the need for racial and cultural diversity training in the police force. Aboriginal people were underrepresented in the police force. Saskatoon police leadership tried to spin this to suggest that Aboriginals were not interested in policing, despite the RCMP having many, many, many Aboriginal officers compared to the Saskatoon police at the time.
Yeah.
That rings of what they used to say about women in STEM too. Like, women just don't seem to like math. That's what, like, they don't have a mind for science. So you can't. Like,
But with their simple women minds, they're good at feelings and caring.
My Christ, just a bunch of stereotypes again.
Well, and like many Aboriginal people, even in the 90s, they were lawyers, they were social workers, corrections officers. So it's like, why the fuck wouldn't they be police officers too? Like it's not that they weren't interested,
It's that they were denied.
It's almost like there's a systematic system keeping them out. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. You obviously didn't hear it here first.
Yes. The inquiry would eventually hold Constable Lutit up as an example of the kind of Aboriginal officer that the Saskatoon police need to hire. He was questioning things. He was concerned. He brought his concerns forward. He copied the file to make sure that, there was he could document it. Like, no, he was.
But he just got rebuffed and people didn't give a shit what he had to say.
Well, and he was concerned that if he pushed the issue, he would be disciplined for it. So
it's funny that somebody who actively rebelled against guidelines and rules that he was given, he's what's touted as what should be the example of a cop should be hired. Kind of a commentary of what the rest of the cop shop's like.
Upon his retirement, there was a letter to the editor published in the Star Phoenix that I remember reading, in which an Indigenous member of the community slammed him for abusing his indigenousness to actively oppress Indigenous people while he was a police officer.
I mean,
is he still a cop?
No, he's retired.
And when did he retire?
Number of years ago, but he's written a couple of books.
Okay, I'm just curious. I don't know anything about this guy.
I mean, it's a complicated issue. It's just like members of visual minorities becoming like police in the States. If they're trained in the same corrupt system, then even if they're representative, they're still causing harm. Like, they may try to fight against it, and they may do some great work, but that effect is still existing.
You're still complacent in the system. Yeah. So, but yeah, the inquiry found him to be, what you would expect out of an officer.
A good apple.
Yeah, one of the good apples, I guess, in the police force. So the police service became more interested in defending its employees than serving the public interest of law and justice. In response, the police have tried making filing complaints more accessible to the public. That said, if the police are left to investigate themselves, you can't help but be skeptical.
There are different cultural perspectives on the police, surprisingly. Like, I grew up white. I didn't get harassed by the police a whole bunch. Like, I grew up, most of the time, the police giving me the benefit of the doubt. But we have to be reminded the justice system is colonial.
Yes.
It's put there by oppressive colonialist people, and it was instituted by colonialists, and the descendants of those colonialists are keeping those traditions alive.
Well, exactly. Like when I mentioned that I had been cuffed by cops, like I'm super white. All of my friends were super white. We were busted in a super white neighborhood, and they were just like, oh, we'll just give you another chance. Like, this is a warning.
Yeah.
Basically, even though if I had been literally any other shade other than what I am, probably would have been taken to jail.
Yeah. And I seen it actively working as a bouncer. Sometimes we had to call the cops because, a bunch of people got in a brawl and we weren't able to handle it anymore. And I saw actively how they treated people differently. Some white college kid versus some indigenous guy, like they treated them very, very differently.
Even if it was an indigenous college kid versus a white college kid.
Yeah. So just as an example, the justice system is colonial and foreign, indigenous justice is not, and this causes problems. As Neil Stonechild's sister told the inquiry, quote, in general terms, there was no trust established there at all, period. My mother tried to teach us children that under every circumstance, you need to help, you need to call the police. That's their job. That's what they're there for. When you have conflict with that, what you've been taught your whole life, but you're experiencing a whole lot of other things that's just otherwise, then I'm sorry. There was a few incidences in my personal life and our entire families. And I'm talking, when I say my entire family, I'm talking my mother's, my brother's, my uncle, my cousin, whoever happened to be in our home at the time. They were never reported simply because there is no trust. And it didn't. That's not going to say that I'm slashing up the SASKATOON police force because, please, there is a lot of good people out there. I know there is. We can't ignore the fact that they're human. Everybody's a human being. We don't have no trust for the city police. If we had more trust for the city police, my mother would have been reporting them left and right center every time they went AWOL from somewhere, every time they went, unlawfully at large from somewhere. Or they run away from their community home where she was trying so hard to help them. She was trying so hard to help them, to understand their cycle or whatever you want to call it, their way of being and holding themselves. You can kind of see through what his sister is saying, kind of the breakdown of the role of what the police should be. The police, when we talk about the ideal form of justice, what the police should be, they should help. They should improve community relations. When you see a police officer, there shouldn't be fear. There shouldn't be a need to hide. They should be people that are helping you along in your community.
Yeah, not someone to be scared of. I am a white woman, and when I see the cops, I'm like, fuck, oh shit. And I know that I've passed that along to my, rightfully or wrongfully, I've been passing my opinions about the cops along to my kid.
Yeah.
But if police has it as it should be, they should be seen as helpers in our community, not someone that's going to punish us.
Yeah, when you see a cop car, it shouldn't be, oh shit. It should be safety. You should be feeling safety.
Yeah.
But no,
no one feels
safe. Think about it when you're driving and you see a cop following you. What are your thoughts?
Oh fuck! What am I doing wrong?
You're thinking, I'm safe. He's protecting me. No, you don't fucking think that. You think, shit, he's gonna fuck with me one way or the other.
And this is coming from super white people.
I'm fucking neon white.
Yeah, you are. Okay.
You put me in the dark and I glow.
I can't imagine how it is for people who are of a darker shade than we are.
Well, look at directly what Neil Stonechild's sister says. She said that my mom, when people wandered off, when their lives could have been in danger, I didn't call the police. We don't trust them. It wasn't worth it.
Nope, exactly. So the following recommendations were made. 1, the province review the Coroner's Act based on recommendations from people who testified at the inquiry. 2, province establish an intro to policing program to get more Indigenous officers in law enforcement. 3, the Minister of Justice establish an advisory board from police, Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities to focus on recruitment of Indigenous officers. 4, the province improve procedures around police complaints and that materials be made public and widely dispersed with regards to this, like in the lobby of the police station, in interview rooms, etc. 5, police forces will have a member who is Indigenous with the rank of sergeant to liaise and be an informal and be an informal ombudsman. Okay.
Try it again.
Five. Police forces will have a member who is Indigenous with the rank of sergeant to liaise and be an informal ombudsman. Oh my God, I can't say ombudsman. Okay, what's the ombudsman? Ombudsman. Okay, I'm gonna try it.
Ombudsman.
Okay. 5. Police forces will have a member who is Indigenous with the rank of sergeant to liaise and be an informal ombudsman to deal with people of Indigenous heritage. 6. Police forces need to provide an annual report to the Ministry of Justice about complaints and nature of complaints against officers and the disposition of these complaints. 7. Officers receive race relations training. 8. Review of officers' training in anger management and dispute resolution. Cops need to be professional and react appropriately. So I've taken nonviolent crisis intervention training as part of working with the John Howard Society in like a halfway house setting, and we had to do that all the time. So it's probably good that cops do that.
And remember back to my police training episode, like a lot of police departments make a habit of hiring aggressive cops because they believe that they will act in dire situations. And because of that, a lot of cops with anger problems have been put on the beat because they are aggressive and they will act in dire situations. But it has the result of them brutalizing citizens because you hired somebody with an anger problem and gave them authority and weapons.
Mm-hmm. Whereas you hire someone like me who does not have anger issues but is fucking great in a crisis. I don't know.
Yeah.
And you need to kind of be able to sort through those people.
And I just wanted to reiterate, because we touched on it earlier, when I say that, like, hiring members of visible minorities to be police doesn't solve the problem, I'm not saying that it isn't a step. Like, that's it. Like, having relevant people in there would be a step. I'm annoyed when liberals and centrists and even fucking conservatives say, like, well, we hired more like Indigenous cops, so problem solved, right? Like,
it's like
not problem solved. It's like step one. Yeah.
Step one of like 20.
Yeah.
You know, to reform the police.
Yeah.
Like that's what it is. It's like step one of 20.
Yeah. Yep. In 2005, Propaganda released the album Potemkin City Lights. The song The Bringer of Greater Things was dedicated to Rondi Nestis, Neil Stonechild, and Lawrence Wagner, murdered by members of the Saskatoon Police Department in the album notes.
Leon, would you like to read your sheet?
Are you on 30?
Yeah.
Nope, that's my sheet.
Where the fuck is my sheet?
Would you like me to read your sheet? Where's your sheet?
Where? I don't know where it is.
He doesn't even fucking know. Dude's so stoned.
It's the one with a 30 on it. I've done the science.
Would you like me to read it? No, I got it. Are you sure you don't want me to read it?
I got this.
As long as it doesn't say ombudsman, I'm good to go.
Ombudsman.
Leon.
No, I read this to someone 2 days ago.
Oh, fuck you.
Canadian musician Chris Demeanor wrote the song One Shoe, which refers to Stonechild, who was found missing a shoe. In 2015, author Candice McLean, and fuck her, I protested at her book launch with a sign that said Indigenous Lives Matter.
I don't know who that is.
APTN interviewed me.
Cool.
Yeah, I was pretty tight. I was the only white guy there. I was proud of myself.
Good for you, white guy.
Thanks. Yeah. So in 2015, horrible author Candice McLean, who's horrible, wrote the shitty, horrible book, When Police Become Prey, The Cold Hard Facts of Neil Stonechild's Freezing Death, which was a bullshit book full of lies.
When police become prey. Can you cry victim any harder?
Oh my God.
People who murdered Indigenous people. Yeah, you're definitely the victim. People who organized the murder of Indigenous people, you're the victim. Yeah.
In the book, she tried to exonerate Hartwig and Hanger. Fuck me sideways in half.
Later.
In the book, In the book, they tried to...
How high are you? He's like, no,
high.
It's high, how are you?
In the book, they tried to exonerate Hartwig and Sanger. Apparently, there was a book signing that would have coincided with the 25th anniversary of Stonechild's death, which was canceled. I know because I was there.
Yuck.
Yuck.
Well, good for canceling it. That's fucking yucky.
Yeah, she's just terrible. And it was at the Anavets Club, the Army, Navy, and Air Force Veterans Association's club downtown. And there were a bunch of white racists there, and it was just super racist, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
I imagine that video we played on episode 1 would seem familiar.
Yes, there was that sort of interaction because protesters went down into the Anavets Club and like busted in during the book launch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was intense.
Yeah,
I thought my sign was going to get broken by a white person.
Yeah.
I just want everybody to know that my name is Songgirl. And I am a member of the Stonechild family. I'm a descendant of Neil Stonechild. And you, with this book, I have read bits and pieces of it in the past. And with this book, you have been re-victimizing the family. You have humiliated them. You have discriminated them. This needs to stop. Right. Everybody that is here is pretty much in support of this family.
I'm not insulting the Stonechild family. I am trying to get to the truth about how it got
there is no truth to this. It has been no.
Don't touch her.
Do not touch me. Do not touch me. You have no. Okay, I am not talking to you. I'm talking to Candace.
I'm asking Candace. Okay. I'm asking you to let Candace finish.
Okay. Can you please
allow her to speak?
I am allowed to speak. That is my right to speak. And I will speak on behalf of my family.
You have to let Candace speak as well.
She has spoken enough. We have heard enough already.
We've heard enough, exactly.
You are hurting my family. You are hurting this Stonechild community.
Don't want to know what happened to Neil.
They know what happened to them. This is all you're opening up all the wounds again.
You said to me, we still don't know
how do you know even this is
Okay,
how do you know?
Because I'm trying to make a presentation here, and you're interrupting and you're being damn rude.
Yes, we are.
You are being rude and offensive to that young man who died.
You cannot let that
man and they got caught. That's what happened.
That man is no more racist.
We are not going to say and listen to any more of this.
That's fine. Then please leave. Okay.
Trying to get this in reinvestigated.
Please, let's just
guilty.
Well, the investigation was done. It was closed, and there was no need and no reason for you to reopen it.
There was a reason. There was an injustice been done.
No, it's not.
Innocent men.
The injustice is to the family.
Terrible injustice.
That's who the injustice is to.
Anybody whose lives have been
ruined
unjustly,
unjustly, I
will
it's
defend.
to Stella. It's to Dean. It's to all of them. It's to
don't
Neil. You cannot even allow Neil to rest in peace after 27 years.
All right, let's go. Get her point. Let's go.
Shame! Shame!
In March of 2016, it came to light that Saskatoon police removed Starlight Tours section from their Wikipedia article. The IP address that made the change was made from a Saskatoon police IP address. Police said they wiped server logs after 30 days. And, in quotes, "We will never know for sure what computer, who signed into that. It's my understanding that at any time, up to 200 people would be utilizing the same server." That's some fucking bullshit right there.
Well, I want to throw that out because these are the people who are like investigating online like child pornography and shit.
And they
so if they can fucking nail, some guy in India for some child pornography through like this coordinated international fucking police force, how the fuck don't they know who signed in on the fucking server and made that goddamn change? change. Like, honest to fucking God.
Yeah, that's fucking yucky.
Yeah,
and bullshit.
And
so much bullshit.
Like if they're like any other government agency that like owns and operates like uses the internet and uses proprietary emails, they have to log in under a username and password, which they're probably required to change every 3 months. And like when they request information, all that shit's logged.
Yes.
And like, the servers are wiped after 30 days. Very convenient.
When I started working at my job, I was a low-level employee, or I guess low. I mean, not low as in like degrading low, but I mean like in introductory level.
Yeah, like an entry-level job.
You're an entry-level employee, and I had requested internet access because at the time they didn't give you internet access by default. I had requested internet access. They gave it to me. I was conducting my job or whatever, doing my thing, and then I'd surf the internet on my lunch breaks and coffee breaks, which is what you did back in, the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And the boss came up to me one day and was like, please explain this to me. And on this list, like he gave me like a ream of paper, which basically listed every website I was on, every how long on every website I was, and basically broke out all my time. And I was like, well, I surfed it on my lunch break and coffee break. Like, there's like, if you look at the times, that's when they line up. I'm not fucking around doing nothing.
Like, were you on cracked.com?
Yeah.
No, I was generally just on Flickr because that was a thing in the early 2000s.
Right. Okay.
And he was like, well, what's with it? I'm like, well, if you look at the times, they line up with my coffee break and lunch break. So I'm like, I'm not fucking around on work time. And he's like, oh, okay. I got the report. I figured I'd ask you some questions about it because, why would an entry-level employee spend so much time on the internet? And it's like,
much time.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was the early 2000s then. It was like forever ago.
Okay, right. Sorry.
If I had to guess,
I keep forgetting.
If I had to guess, this is some order to cover up bad press that was covered up by like, there's so many people that have access to the computer. Who can really know?
Well, exactly. And it's like, if my employer can produce this report outlining every website I was on, how the fuck did the Saskatoon police not have that?
Yes. No, that seems like a bunch.
Like, this was a bullshit reason.
In 2016.
Exactly.
That wasn't that long ago.
Exactly. It was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
They did this to me in like the year, I don't know, like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So no, seriously, fuck. Like, bullshit on that.
Yeah.
No, that's bullshit. All right. And then lastly, in 2017, Micmac artist Kathy Elliott completed a 5-week workshop with students from Sheridan College for her musical Starlight Tour.
And that's our episode.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, like, I don't think any other podcast out there has gone through like the work of going through the entire inquiry. And
okay, well, we can't say we. It was all Richard.
It was.
I'm sorry. If you like this episode, it was all me.
It was
if
all
you
you.
didn't like this episode, it was we.
Yeah.
Okay, can I just say that? We went through it. If you don't like the episode, but if you did like the episode, it was me.
It was an excellent amount of research done by our very own Richard Bigley.
Well, this is like an OVpod deep dive.
Yes.
Like, but I digress. For Occultae Veritatis, I am Richard Bigley.
Sage Murray.
Leon Filger.
Ood Gallifrey.
And the soundboard demon.
Goodbye.
Love you. Bye.
See you next week.
Playing us out the song mentioned and featured in the episode. This is Bringer of Great Things by Propagandhi. Enjoy and see you in the after show.
handshake crushing blow. The blankets that keep you warm, we've soiled with disease. The bringer of greater things, creator of brighter days. The hollow song you sing at the ending of your day.
And there is the end of our first deep dive. This is a topic we wanted to cover, and we wanted to put the effort in, and once again, big thank you to Richard for pouring through 8,500 fucking pages. What a hero that dude is. But yeah, we got some comments along the course of the series that were along the lines of, this was over 30 years ago. In November 25th, 2020, it was 30 years since Neil Stonechild's death. And we got some comments along the lines of, why are you guys talking about this old case? The Neil Stonechild tragedy, the way that he was handled and killed by the Saskatoon police, isn't an isolated incident. And it isn't an isolated incident in time either. His tragedy is one of many, and he is a symbol of the injustice and discrimination that resides in Saskatoon, resides in Saskatchewan, resides in Canada. We get some flack for all the complaining we do about Americans and American society, but when you point with one finger, three are pointing back at you. Canada has a deep darkness of discrimination and racism, and we can't ignore it. We can't turn away. We can't pretend that the problems are in the past. That was our motivation for talking about this, and you know, discrimination continues up until today. It's an ongoing battle, and we have to keep on fighting for it, in whatever way we can. That's it for me. I've been Ood Gallifrey. See you next week, where we talk about some other interesting bullshit. Have a wonderful night.